The Last of Us Part 2 is emotional. The Last of Us Part 2 is violent. And The Last of Us Part 2 is controversial. And I mean really controversial. When developer Naughty Dog released this game in 2020, they took some major risks with the story. The player base was basically divided into two camps. Those that thought The Last of Us Part 2 was the greatest game ever made, a masterpiece in every way, perfect and even better than the first. And those that thought Naughty Dog personally came over to their house and took a hot, steamy dump smack dab in the middle of their living room. So I wanted to take another look at this game and ultimately determine how good or bad it really is, now that the drama has mostly died down. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I will be taking a deep dive into Naughty Dog's second entry in the Last of Us series. I will critique the story, the characters, and the gameplay, and ultimately find out where this game belongs on my ultimate video game tier list. And you know what? Just because I love pain, and this game is very much about pain, I'm going to be doing this on grounded mode. The hardest difficulty that The Last of Us has to offer, with no HUD, no listen mode, less supplies, and much tougher enemies. But first, we're gonna need a little bit of context because this is not the first game in the series. This is the second game. And to really understand these opening moments, and the whole game for that matter, you kind of need to know exactly what happened in the first game. And let's make this a little fun. I'm gonna try to go for a world record here and speedrun a recap of The Last of Us Part 1. So the first game starts and you play as this girl Sarah who has a dad named Joel, and weird stuff starts to happen in your town where infected people are attacking everyone. So Joel, his brother Tommy, and Sarah try to escape the town, but their car crashes and they have to run on foot. But it's too late. The military is just going around shooting people, and they shoot Sarah, causing Joel over the course of 20 years to become a hardened badass, surviving in a post-apocalyptic Boston. Him and his partner Tess, who are smugglers, meet the leader of a group called the Fireflies, Marlene, who hires them to smuggle this little girl Ellie to rendezvous with more Fireflies. You see, because Ellie is immune to infected bites, she got bit in a mall with her friend / crush Riley, but only Riley turned. So Ellie is special and she can perhaps offer a cure. Maybe. Tess, though, is not immune to the affected bites, and so Joel, who didn't even want to do this in the first place, ends up taking Ellie to find the Fireflies. On their way, they meet a lone survivalist Bill who's crazy and who booby-trapped his whole town, and they end up getting a car, which they're going to use to go visit Tommy, but first they get trapped by hunters in Pittsburgh who might be trying to harvest their organs. Along the way, though, we meet another duo, Sam and Henry, and they all escape the city and into some scary-ass sewers and through a suburb with a crazy sniper that Joel ends up taking out, but then goons arrive and infected as well, and one of them bites Sam, and well, that doesn't really turn out too well. But then they get to Tommy in a town called Jackson, who tells him where the Fireflies are at a university. But they aren't there, Tommy, you liar. But some goons are, where Joel ends up getting impaled, and so Ellie has to try to revive him in the wintertime while surviving on her own. But one day she kills a bunny and a deer, and she runs into this creepy guy named David who seemed chill, but then we find out he eats people, so she starts kicking his ass. And Joel also wakes up and starts kicking ass too, so he can rescue Ellie because, well, he's grown fond of Ellie. It's almost like an opportunity to raise a daughter again. She somehow is able to pierce his cold exterior and make him feel again. So they meet up and he actually takes Ellie to the Fireflies, but they actually forgot to mention that they have to kill Ellie in order to get the cure to work. So Joel goes ham and fucking kills everyone, and I mean everyone, even the doctor and Marlene. Ellie was knocked out at the time, so she doesn't really know what happened. She asks Joel what the hell happened, and he says the cure didn't work, and she's like, "You swear, bro?" And he's like, "I swear." Okay, and that's The Last of Us Part 1. And with that fresh on our minds, we can get into The Last of Us Part 2 Ungrounded, which starts with a close-up of a guitar and a symbol of a moth. Two very important icons in this game, but we will discuss that later because right now Joel is spilling the tea to Tommy. He confesses what he did on that day at the end of the first game, choosing to kill the Fireflies and save Ellie, even though it meant that a cure to the infection was lost, perhaps forever. Now, this was one of the most impactful endings to a game ever. And for me, that little ending part of the game turned it from amazing into an absolute masterpiece. It affected me on a very deep level. Now, Joel, having his daughter taken away from him, having to then fight in a harsh, unforgiving world, turned him into a hardened killing machine that didn't like to show any emotions. And in meeting Ellie, it only allowed him to regain some hope and allowed him to somehow again fulfill his parental dreams, filling a surrogate father role for Ellie. And so Joel was going to be damned if he was going to have that taken away from him again. Perhaps he was saving an innocent little girl, but part of that decision was definitely a little bit of selfishness. The consequences of such a decision doomed the fate of the world. And yet, despite all that pointed towards this being the wrong decision, a decision that damned humanity, us as players, or at least me, I sympathized with Joel. I loved Joel. I agreed with Joel. As humans, we kind of form these tribes and we have a very strong, deep connection to family. And these families, these tribes, they become more important to us than any outsiders. I think it's something deep in our evolution to be this way. And it's something that The Last of Us Part 2 explores. And so setting it up in this way where Joel talks about the very thing that will kick off this entire game, it's very important. Now, Tommy does seem to take this news with a heavy heart, but he doesn't seem too angry about it. In fact, he later says to Joel he probably would have done the same thing. What's interesting though, and something we have to remember, is Tommy used to be a Firefly. Part of his tribe was the Fireflies. He knew Marlene, and certainly he knew some of the other people that Joel killed. We don't know why he left the Fireflies, but I would have anticipated a little bit of a stronger reaction here. Although I will say Tommy does have strong protective instincts when it comes to family. And of course, Joel is family as well. We have to remember that Tommy too, like Joel, was very quick to kill others during those early days of the outbreak, including military, in order to protect Sarah. And this was before anyone really even knew what was going on. At the same time though, Tommy did want to save that family on the side of the road. And he also had some desire to save the world by joining the Fireflies. And there was something that did cause a rift for a while between these two brothers. And I had always assumed it was this world view. Joel representing survival at all costs and Tommy representing hope and community. And so I did think that maybe Joel's choice would have given Tommy a little bit more grief and conflict. Tommy is an interesting one though. Sometimes he does seem like maybe he's just a plot device, but perhaps there is a more complicated man underneath. We don't get a lot of him in The Last of Us Part 1 to really explore, but we do get a lot of him in this one, and he's very interesting to think about and to analyze. So I will be doing much of that throughout this video. Now, beyond Tommy's reaction here, beyond whether it makes sense, what's really important about this scene and why it's very important that this is the first scene of the game is that these events that Joel is confessing to is really the whole impetus for this whole game. What he did on that fateful day kicks off the entire events that we are about to see unfold before our eyes. And so starting here is a reminder to the player of what has transpired so that they will understand what will transpire in this game. As the scene ends though, the camera lingers on an open window with drapes flowing in the breeze, much like the start screen for the original game. And right here we get to play just a little bit of a tease as Joel. Realistically though, we're controlling the horse, but in essence we're controlling Joel. And so we roam back to Jackson, and damn, is this game beautiful. They really just go all out right in the beginning. This is very clearly Naughty Dog's greatest strength. It's beauty and detail in their games. And honestly, I never had a real appreciation for the beauty of American landscapes until I experienced this game. And really, they do a good job capturing the essence of the Wyoming countryside. I went to Yellowstone a few years back, and this is actually what it looks like. So after making it to town, Joel heads off, and it gets dark, and he meets with Ellie to essentially deliver that guitar that he was cleaning during the confession. And one thing you might notice is as he approaches Ellie, she is listening to the song True Faith, which is the same song she sings in the reveal trailer, that famous reveal trailer, the one that gave me goosebumps and tears streaming down my face when I watched it. Part of that was because I thought it meant factions too, but that's a sore subject. Now Joel is pretty awkward in the scene. He's trying a bit too hard, as Ellie does have a bit of a colder demeanor towards him. Now I thought originally this is because she's growing up and every teen kind of hates their parents or parental figures at the time, but playing again I realized she's also probably very conflicted about that lie that Joel told at the end of last game. Because, I mean, it seems like she kind of doesn't really believe his little story, and probably the more she has thought about it, the more it doesn't all add up. Here, though, we get another very small little tease of getting to play Joel, playing the guitar and playing Future Days by Pearl Jam, which is director Neil Druckmann's favorite band. And another call out here to the animation team. I mean, Joel's lips, they look so realistic. And as you get close up to his face, you can see the lines and imperfection in his beard. No developers can touch Naughty Dog when it comes to graphics. I mean, compare this to anything that came out in 2020. Heck, compare this to games that are still coming out today, a whole generation later. You are not going to find something this beautiful and this quality. But let's fast forward 4 years as we find Ellie, who has grown up to be a teenager, woken by a knock on her door by her friend, Jessie. And Ellie, in classic awkward fashion, admits she kissed Jessie's ex-girlfriend, Dina, at the dance last night. But Jessie is like really chill about it. By the way, they broke up last week, but he's just cool. He's cool as a cat. No worries from him, not even a hint that he cares. Ellie grabs her stuff, and by the way, her room has some pretty cool Easter eggs. Like she has a PS3 and copy of the Jack and Daxter series, and she has some Savage Starlight stuff, which are comic books you collect from the first game. She's a total nerd, like probably most of us are. Now you're walking through Jackson, and there's a couple things here to note. One is you do get to pet the dog, which is a huge win. But also there's Gustavo Santaolalla, the game's composer, and he's just chilling there, strumming a banjo. But it's time to meet up with Maria because what happened last night is, well, because of that kiss, Ellie ended up having an incident with Seth, and we don't know all the details, but Maria, the town leader, and Tommy's wife, tries to have the two make a mea culpa, with Seth making Ellie a bigot sandwich and Ellie pretending to, but not really accepting the apology. We also learn that another thing that happened last night was a bit of a fight with Joel. We don't have the full details on everything just yet, but right now the game is just setting up a bunch of unclosed curiosity loops for the story, essentially offering some context, but not all that we need to know in order to understand what exactly transpired at this dance. And this is enticing some mystery and intrigue, which will only be answered by continuing on in the story. Now here we get to meet Dina, and we talk a bit about the night before, but these kiddos throw snowballs at you, so now it's time to fuck shit up. Now this section is a fun little thing, but what this really is, from a game design perspective, is it's a bit of a tutorial. As you throw snowballs, you are essentially learning the skills that you will need to throw bricks and bottles later in the game. And Naughty Dog does a nice job weaving these tutorials throughout these initial parts of the story, giving the player a slow ramp up of understanding all the mechanics before actually needing to put them all together in real combat. So we beat the shit out of these kids, and now it's time to embark on a patrol with Dina. But rather than taking us directly there, we are taken somewhere else, to a lodge, an infamous lodge, which is not infamous yet, but it will be. And we have sleeping teens or young adults, and one such character wakes up. We're not really meant to know who this is yet or what she's doing, but damn, is she yoked. I mean, look at those guns. Am I jealous? No, I'm not. But her friend, let's just call him Owen for now. He's been out in the snow and he has something to show this character. Let's just call her Abby for now. And it is at this moment that something crazy and very unexpected happens. We are given control over this Abby character as she walks through the snowy woods. At this point, we know little about her, but we now know that she is going to be pivotal to this story. If Naughty Dog is going to put us in control of her, she's got to be important. So we follow Owen and we get a little window into these characters and what's going on with them. Owen has this girlfriend Mel, who we soon find out is pregnant, but this is complicated because Abby and Owen have a little bit of a history. We also learn that Abby has this intense fear of heights, and this will get tested to the max much later on. Now, what Owen has to show Abby is that they have found a small city, Jackson specifically, and they are in search of someone in particular. And well, the odds seem very stacked against them that they can even successfully find this person, but they think they might be able to find a patrol like the one they spotted earlier going towards the ski lodge and get someone to give them some information. Owen even jokes that no one would actually be willing to do that, and this is all going to mean something later. Now, in these early moments, we see a little bit of a nasty side to Abby, who is angry when she hears Owen got Mel pregnant and that he doesn't want to just jump in and go for her plan to find this person. At this point, I find Abby very unlikable for this bratty behavior, and I'm not sure if they're trying to make us feel this way in this moment or not, but she is definitely rubbing me the wrong way. After fighting with Owen, she stubbornly just goes out on her own to find the patrol and make her plan happen. And as we're forced to kind of play someone that even in these early moments we don't like, we do get a lot of tutorial gameplay. We learn to dodge with the L1 button. We learn to stealth take out enemies, going up to them, pressing triangle to grab them, and square to take them out. And there is a little bit of gunplay as you go prone and you encounter infected. Of course, there's also a little bit of running away as they chase you, until you eventually come across some horse tracks, which you will be following. But before we can get any further, we switch to Ellie on patrol with Dina. Now, one thing that is interesting here is, of course, as we go through the same events in the same timeline, the story is switching back and forth between this Abby character and Ellie. And this is how you would kind of expect this to go. But later on in the game, this is very much not the case, and we will get there, but it definitely doesn't flow as nicely. Now, as you trade off to Ellie, the tutorials are definitely not over, because now you get some more basic combat, this time being handled by Ellie. You do a little bit of the optional dialogue, you do some rope climbing, and oh man, rope climbing is awesome in this game. This first section isn't that great, but there are some really good ones coming up. You also get a little bit of scavenging as you begin to collect supplements, which will be used to upgrade your character with things like extra health and better weapon sway. You also collect gear, which will be used later to upgrade your guns, and you collect collectibles in the form of notes and letters that ultimately enrich the story, providing context and environmental storytelling for the area that you are inhabiting. You also get these trading cards, which are in the Savage Starlight theme, and those are just fun. Now, finally, you also scavenge for material supplies, which you can then use to craft things like health kits and bombs. And this definitely sets up a whole section of the gameplay that you will be encountering along your journey. Now, another aspect of the tutorial is the quick throw of a brick and bottle followed by a melee move. And this is great game design. Remember the snowball fight? During this fight, all you had to do was use your quick throw to throw the snowballs. But now the developers have added a deeper layer of complexity. You now can use the bricks and bottles to quick throw to a target, but it gets more complex as this will stun them for a time and give you time to follow up with your next move. In this case, you will utilize melee to finish them off. And this loop of teaching you one simple thing and then adding a new layer of complexity onto that is an amazing way to just allow players to become much more fluent with the overall game mechanics. Now, after taking out a few of the infected runners, which are basically the level 1 infected, they can see you and they can chase after you, and they're usually a little bit easier to kill. After facing off against them, you run into the infamous clickers. And these motherfuckers, they can't see you, but oh boy, can they hear you. They walk around clicking away, and they do these supersonic clicks where they can hear anything moving within a cone. And you have to be super still and stealthy to remain undetected, especially on grounded mode here where there is no forgiveness. Of course, you can use bricks and bottles to distract them, to create sound elsewhere and lead them off, or you can throw it at them and stun them. Now, unlike the first game where Joel had to craft shivs in order to stealth take down these clickers, where using that shiv actually wore down and you would lose it, Ellie actually has an indestructible switchblade which can stealth kill clickers at any time. That is, if you can remain in stealth, and as you will find, I really suck at stealth, so sometimes you just need to learn how to brute force them. But at this point, the basics of combat have essentially been set up, and so it's time for things to start heating up, literally, as this is where you get your first Molotov and you need to face off against infected in the supermarket. Now, I don't know what I did, but I immediately lose stealth once I got in here, so I just gotta go guns a-blazing, and this is gonna happen to me so many times throughout this playthrough. Ultimately, though, we do escape the mayhem and we escape the supermarket, but there is a snowstorm, so you and Dina have to take shelter in a library. And this is also the hangout spot for Towns member and local pothead Eugene, who we learn was a Firefly with Tommy, and they had some fun in the past, slowed torturing people, apparently. It's a little bit more Tommy lore and actually gives you more understanding that he maybe has done some really bad things in the past too, and that's not just Joel. I often thought he was the more good natured, hopeful, and giving of the two brothers, especially in joining the Fireflies and looking for the light, but I guess he maybe is only better by a couple of degrees more than Joel. Now, here we do see another Easter egg with a copy of Uncharted 2, and there is another one I know is in here, but I couldn't quite find it. It's an inappropriate play on words with Crash Bandicoot. I must have missed that somewhere, but it's a nice find. You also get to see your first workbench where you can upgrade guns, but I don't have enough parts to do squat. This might be because I'm ungrounded, but I don't have enough. But this leaves Ellie and Dina to kind of further strengthen their relationship, and so they snuggle up, sheltering from the storm, while we switch to Abby for what will be the most controversial part of the whole game. So Abby has now gotten herself in trouble running from infected in the snowstorm, going any way she possibly can to get away. And she ends up getting to this building where there's a chain link fence, and just as she's about to die, as she's about to get overwhelmed by infected, she is rescued by none other than Joel. Very convenient. Tommy is there too, and they fight some infected, but ultimately they do need to get somewhere safer, and that is when Abby offers up the lodge that her and her friends have been staying at. Now, Joel and Tommy very quickly accept this solution without even knowing who this girl is or what her friends are doing so close to Jackson. They go there and they introduce themselves and they admit their names, and this is where things start to become clear. The mission that Abby and her friends were on was to hunt down and to kill Joel Miller. And that is exactly what they are about to do. Okay, so it's time to talk about this. This is the most controversial part of the whole game, the death of Joel. It happens soon, it happens quickly, and it happens in a very disgraceful manner, with Abby just beating him senselessly with a golf club. Now, zooming back, even before this game came out, the common theory about this game was always that Joel was going to die. In the initial reveal trailer that came out in 2016, Ellie is sitting there stating that she is going to be going on some sort of a revenge trip, and all we see is the backside of Joel. The theory was this was his ghost, or something, that basically he was dead in this sequence. But either way, I don't think too many people had a problem with him dying or would have really been surprised by his death. But to kill him this early on in the game was a very bold move. I mean, we only really got like 2 real chances to even slightly play as him, and he didn't even have much screen time yet, and now he's dead and gone. And he also just gets killed in this very disgraceful manner. Many of us love Joel. We played a full game as him. We empathized with him, and to see him die like a dog in the dirt with this guy spitting on him by a golf club, it's hard to watch and it's really hard to accept. Usually in stories, we have our heroes going out in a heroic way, sacrificing themselves for others and with plenty of time for them to give some inspiring speech or do something noble before they go. Not here. This is The Last of Us. This was brutal and this was sudden. And I will say this, and this is where I'm going to start pissing people off, so let's just get into it. So this choice to kill Joel quickly and in this manner, I think was actually a brilliant move for the story that Naughty Dog was trying to tell. I mean, I was bawling at this moment. I was angry at this moment. I felt in some ways violated. Naughty Dog had forced me to play as this Abby character and help her get to the point we are now with Joel dead. I felt betrayed, but this is kind of what they wanted me to feel, because this sets up the whole rest of the story, or at least the part that is Ellie's revenge quest. And as they stated in the director's commentary, this moment aligns us with Ellie and her mission. But there's a problem. And this is where, if I haven't pissed you off yet, this is where I'll piss off the rest of you, if I haven't already. While I think it makes sense to kill him early, and horribly, in order to set up this story that they wanted to tell, the circumstances that got Joel and Tommy into this situation just simply don't make sense. And this part just doesn't work for me at all. Firstly, we are to believe that Abby and her friends who just arrived to town are going to get lucky enough to be able to isolate and find their exact target in the middle of a snowstorm where you can't see shit. The circumstances that led to Abby and Joel meeting don't even make that much sense to me. I get that she was heading to some lights and that some patrol was likely to be there, but having it be Joel is just too coincidental and too convenient. The next part that just doesn't work is Joel and Tommy are trying to escape and they just very quickly accept Abby's plans to go to the lodge with her friends. Now perhaps they had no choice. They were running. They had to quickly think, but they also have no idea who Abby is and they have no reason to trust her. They don't even ask her once, what is she doing out there? And also, aren't they very much aware of the surrounding area? Wouldn't they know of good places on their own to escape to? They shouldn't have to rely on a complete outsider to know where to go for safety. But so they get to this lodge, and while they are clearly outnumbered, they just go ahead and give out their names and are nice and chill as if the outside world isn't full of horrible people, as if Joel and Tommy haven't been on the other side of that for years, as if they have no expectation that after all they've done, no one would come for revenge. And as if on day one of the outbreak, Joel and Tommy didn't immediately turn into stone cold killers. I mean, isn't this area known for having bandits all the time? We literally fought them in the first game. Did we somehow wipe them all out? That hasn't been made clear. Now, one of the main arguments here is Joel and Tommy have both gone soft. They have been able to live comfortably in Jackson for years, and Joel especially has softened his heart as he's been able to be sort of a father again, and as he has aged, he has lost a step or two. And look, I get this argument, but where are the clues? Where are the breadcrumbs? Naughty Dog's main mistake here, I think, is that they didn't offer any sort of foreshadowing or clues or anything of that sort that Joel and Tommy were softening or losing a step or two prior to this happening. This would allow the player to have something to latch onto as a way to explain and justify what just happened. Something as simple as having a conversation where Dina says something like, "Man, I heard Joel was a real killer back in the day. I can't believe he's such a big softy now." Or mentioning that the bandits had all been wiped out and the town had been at peace and most of the passerbys had been peaceful, or people that they've taken in to grow the community. The only real time we've had in this whole series about Joel being maybe a little bit too trusting is when he ran into Sam and Henry in Pittsburgh and joined forces with them. But that was probably because Sam was a kid, and we have seen through clues that kids can be one of Joel's weak spots. Other than that, we have mostly known Joel as a stone cold killer who activated on day one of the outbreak, who has crossed a lot of people and historically has been weary of nearly everyone that he's come in contact with that's not a part of his tribe. But somehow we're supposed to buy that this turn of character has happened. And basically what I'm trying to say is the players shouldn't have to be doing any sort of mental gymnastics to understand how they got themselves into this situation. Sure, they made a mistake here, and realism is that, people make mistakes and they don't always go according to character. I mean, humans are contradictory, blah, blah, blah. Sure, but to me, that's just a cop-out to say that your characters can do literally anything. I really think the truth is Naughty Dog should have just spent more time on making sure that this moment was going to work for people, on leaving clues, or even making some of the circumstances more true to character. In the initial plans for The Last of Us Part 2, Abby was actually supposed to become a part of the Jackson community, essentially get taken in and make friends with people first before ultimately finding a window to take Joel out. And honestly, I would have much preferred this angle. If they had taken the time on the story to do this instead, I would have had no problem with this moment. So now that I've pissed everyone off saying this was both brilliant and stupid at the same time, let's move on, because either way, Joel is now dead. And now I want revenge, just like Ellie wants revenge. And of course, this anger was something that Naughty Dog wanted from us. I just wish they had done it in a different way. So Ellie and Dina are planning to go to Seattle, where they have found out that Abby and her group are from, and they are going to find and they are going to kill every last one of them. What's funny though is Tommy seems to almost be trying to talk Ellie out of getting revenge. And there's a very interesting moment later where things go quite the opposite. Just remember that because I want to revisit that. But first, we're going to take a walk through Joel's house where we see a lot of the memories that we had so fondly of him, where we find his watch from the first game, where we find his trusty revolver. But before Ellie and Dina can run away to Seattle, Maria stops them and explains that Tommy, who also wanted revenge but wanted to protect Ellie, had already left for Seattle and tried to get Maria to keep them there so they don't leave. Maria, though, lets them go so that they can at least try to bring her husband back. And so begins Ellie and Dina's travels to Seattle for day one of their journey. Traveling on horseback through the woods, this game, I cannot say enough, is absolutely beautiful. And we transition from the beauty of Wyoming to the Pacific Northwest in Washington. Along the way, we collect a few cards and we collect a map. And one beautiful thing about this game is, well, you can skip this building that this map is in, but Naughty Dog will end up putting that map further ahead so you don't end up missing it. It makes you feel like you're naturally finding this map, although they'll try to keep giving it to you at other points to make sure that you get it, especially because you will need it later on. Now, early on, the game is beginning to open up, not completely yet, but this is where you're getting your first real series of puzzles. You need to climb over the gate here, and you need to get to a higher elevation using the classic Naughty Dog buddy boost up to a ladder. And then you're going to be doing a little bit of platforming, and it's really funny. This is a long way from Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot days, but they still managed to incorporate some platforming, just more in this realistic grounded game. It's still fun though because, well, even though this is realistic, you get a little thrill as you can imagine yourself having to perform these moves in real life. And as the characters narrowly make their jumps, you get their emotion alongside it. Now, getting over the wall here, and there's more puzzles, but this time with an electrical cord. Now, this is such a small mechanic, but the rope or cord mechanics of this game are very impressive. And apparently Naughty Dog toiled away at this one small little piece for a long time. I try to break the game a little bit by bending and weaving the rope around things, but still it somehow works. And so you ultimately use this to plug into the main gate to open it, and of course it crashes right behind you, which ends up doing two things. One, it reminds you that danger does lurk around. But more importantly, from a design perspective, this level gates you. It makes sure you can't go back all the way to where you came from. And also helps with loading up the next area, which you are going to need because we will soon arrive at the semi-open world section of the map. Now, Naughty Dog is mostly known for its linear game design. The Uncharted series and the first Last of Us, of course, kept you largely on one path, telling their story in their way. Even Crash Bandicoot was also pretty linear, and Naughty Dog's only major open world attempts were the Jak series, which followed a similar pattern to the GTA series of games, and still ultimately had you going to levels within that game world. But in the PS4 generation, Naughty Dog desired to shake it up a bit, and although they wanted to keep their linear design philosophy, they wanted to open things up a bit to allow for more exploration and player discovery. So they coined this term wide linear design, which essentially is a very open seeming world that you can freely explore, but eventually it will funnel you back into the story. This gives the player more rope, but still keeps them on the leash, on the path. And this was first really utilized in Uncharted 4 in the Madagascar driving sections, as well as the island hopping section. And again, this was used in Uncharted Lost Legacy for really the majority of that game. And Naughty Dog initially sought to expand that scope even further with The Last of Us Part 2, incorporating mostly wide linear designs that continually funnel the player into the next story beat, making it feel like the player is naturally experiencing the story while giving them the feeling that they're openly and freely exploring. Ultimately, though, that ambition had to be downsized because development was taking too long. So instead, we got one kind of fully realized section of Seattle that does have this open scope, and another that seems to be a little bit more open, but isn't quite at that same level. And I will say this one section is very impressive as we roam the hilly, overgrown Seattle streets. The map we collected, of course, represents the mini open world that we are in. And as we search for gas, that will allow us to open the gates to get further into Seattle. This section is amazing and perhaps one of the best designed areas of the whole game. What's great about this is you can freely explore and even completely skip some sections, but you're still going to advance to the objective. And if you do take time to explore, you'll be rewarded, of course, with the greatest rewards requiring the greatest risk. For instance, there's a bank that you can enter down in a little bit of an underground area, and inside there are roaming infected. You can totally just say screw this place and leave, or you can venture in. If you do venture in and eliminate the infected, you get this amazing environmental storytelling where you learn about a bunch of goons who tried robbing this bank on Outbreak Day. They figured the commotion would be a nice distraction to get some money, but they ended up getting attacked by the infected as well. Looking back at the world where money actually mattered and seeing how such a crazy circumstance could unfold is reward in and of itself. But yeah, you also get a shotgun here from one of these bank robbers. It's quite genius and engaging. Also, a little Easter egg you can find is in one of these lockboxes you can find a ring with the words Sig Parvis Magna on them. This is Nathan Drake's ring from the Uncharted series. And so this is just one of the optional areas that you can explore. You can also use a rope from a fire truck to get to this otherwise unreachable slab of concrete. And from here you can gather more gear. There's also this touching section in a musical instrument store where Ellie gets to show off her guitar skills a little bit, playing the same song Joel taught her in the beginning of the game. And one of the coolest songs I love, Take On Me. And dang, Dina and Ellie, they're falling in love. This section is beautiful and iconic and again, totally missable. Of course, there are some required sections too, like you do need to go to the courthouse and the synagogue. Depending on which one you choose first, it will allow you to get the gas canister and then also gas for the generator. Now I went to the courthouse first, and as you may know, I suck at stealth, so I quickly exhausted my ammo and dumbly whiffed a Molotov throw, and this left me with next to nothing and very low on health. One thing about this game is even on grounded, the game likes to try to keep you stocked up enough on supplies to get you through to the next encounter. But, well, let's just say that didn't quite happen here. I had one sun bomb and a throwable down in the basement, and I had to make do with what I had. This is where running becomes very useful because generally you can outrun the infected. It's important to stay mobile and look for your window to attack. I prioritized my throwables for the clickers because they're the most deadly. I threw it at them, followed by melee with my machete. Now for most of the runners, I waited for them to attack Dina using her as bait and swung wildly at them the moment their back was turned. It takes a lot of patience too, as you just want to mash the square for melee, but that often will not work out. You got to look for openings and strike when the time is ready. Now this was pretty hard, but so far I have not encountered the most challenging parts of grounded mode, and I'm pretty scared when I think about what's in store for me. Beat this though, and this allowed me to get the gas canister, and all that's left is the gas, so we move on to the synagogue. But first, Dina has some advice for us.
It might be worth grabbing some supplies before we press on.
Yeah, no shit, Dina. So we do more scavenging, and someone had quite the experience here. You get a key to this place called Barco's, and there's a hideout for the Washington Liberation Front, or WLF, which we will find out about later. But for now, you also get a long arm holster to now be able to easily access 2 long arms. Cool. This was an upgrade on the workbench in part 1, but now you just collect it. Another collectible sort of thing I forgot to mention is Ellie's journal. And basically, as you discover things in the environment, she will sketch them or write a note in her journal to keep track. And you can take a look at her notes for extra context and a window into her own thoughts. You can also find a workbench here, and this time I have some supplies. And generally, I would go for more capacity on my hunting rifle or fire rate on my pistols. This allows you to get more bullets out faster, which does come the most in handy, I think, during combat. And there are also lockboxes here which require a code to get in and access. I know some people find these boring, but I find them fun because they give off a little bit of these escape room vibes where you need to search the environment for clues, find a code in order to open it. Although you can bypass all of this by actually paying attention to the tick sounds on the combo lock. Depending on the sound, it can actually alert you to what the correct number is, and so you can actually open it without seeing any clues, just the power of your ears. years. Okay, so on to the synagogue where we have to get by these infected, but I suck at stealth, and so I just say fuck it, and I abandon Dina entirely. Somehow she makes it out as well though. Now, from here, we need to move a crate to get to the gas, and Dina won't get out of the freaking way, but we get it, and we can finally leave the area to open the gates further into Seattle. All in all, this is a great section, and imagining how they wanted to do this throughout the entire game is crazy. That would have been awesome, but I can see where it would have taken a lot longer to get this game done. So we open the gate and we get to this hotel, and this is where we see that Tommy was there, and he actually tortured two of Abby's friends for info about the gate code. And they are using Joel's very cruel method of pitting two against each other. When you have two captive, you make one write it down and you make the other verbally say it, and you see if those stories line up. Joel and Tommy used to do this back in the early days of the outbreak, and we do see Joel do this to find Ellie in the first game. It's a nice callback and a reminder of the cruelties of this world. We gather the code here and we take Shimmer right into a trap. And Shimmer gets offed and Ellie is caught, and one of our captors is actually one of Abby's friends that you might be able to recognize. And they're actually about to kill her. But Dina, who was able to get away, was able to come to your rescue, shooting one from the window above. It's a cool little quick time event here as Ellie grabs this shard of glass used to escape and grabs a nearby knife to rescue Dina. The escape from here, though, it's not pretty. I have like nothing. 2 bullets, the ability to craft a Molotov, and that's it. With something like 10 people to take out or sneak past. First, I try mostly stealth, which I completely suck at, and I die a lot. Eventually, I did find a nice route where I can run most of the way through the first section and basically only have to deal with one guy before moving to the next room. But the next room is freaking hard as well, especially when you have nothing. And if you do manage to get through, they will send a few more on your way. And if you don't pass that, you got to start over all the way from the beginning. And so I had to try this over and over and over again. And one time I even accidentally restarted the whole encounter, so I had to take out the 2 starting goons from the beginning. And I just have to say, in this moment, I was starting to get really nervous. Now, this is actually my first time attempting grounded mode on part 2. I've done it on part 1 before, but part 2 has kind of scared me because of some of the sections coming up. But up until now, grounded had been pretty much a breeze. I barely even noticed that I was playing on it. But here we are on this very early mission, and I am struggling so hard. In Last of Us Part 1, grounded wasn't really that bad for me. I felt like the game kept me pretty much nice and stocked up to make it through, even when they said they're giving you less supplies. But here, I don't have much of anything. I'm struggling so hard, and I'm worried I might not be able to get through this, especially with some of the challenges that I know are ahead. I mean, look, I pride myself on my Last of Us skills, especially with the PvP multiplayer, but grounded on part 2, this is no joke. And now my pride, my ego, and this video is on the line. So to get through this, I tried to rely on my strengths, which is not stealth. I decided I'm going to take out every last one of them, even if I don't have anything. And so I'm going to squeak past the first room, shooting what I have and hiding enough, sneaking around on a few, but mostly just try to go in guns a-blazing. And what was my reward for killing all these guys? Nothing. I got no extra ammo, not even a bullet, and there's nothing to scavenge for in the area either. But I know there's a bottle, so I grab that and I head to the next room. I'm able to actually stealth kill one and actually stealth kill the other, but then more show up. At this point, I just melee and run to a stealth spot so they try to track me, and then just melee some more. This ultimately worked, but this was like 45 minutes of me just retrying over and over this one little section. And this isn't even considered a major section, so we have a long ways to go. So after all that action, you do get to chill a little bit as you hop across a fucking rooftop into an apartment, which is pretty cool. And this place had a PC nerd living in it, but their neighbor over here, he's got class. Got that PS3 ready to go. Now, classic Naughty Dog tactic is using environmental markers to guide the player. In this case, you need to head to a group of buildings, and generally this is telling you the right place to head towards. You can often look and see this off in the distance as you're going through the levels, and generally it's going to tell you this is where you should be going. But another thing they use is blood. Blood is another marker. that they use. And typically, these little side paths offer a nice reward. You do have danger to contend with often, but you will get something for it. Also, just trying to explore more is a way to find totally missable areas, and that is a reward in and of itself. In this case, I actually found a trap mine. Now, I jump into the pool here and try for the classic Naughty Dog Marco Polo call out, but that doesn't work. Perhaps this game is just too serious. Now, this is the second semi-open world section I was talking about, but it is much smaller in scope and doesn't have much optional exploration. It's more optional combat. It has a few paths that you can take to either encounter enemies or sneak right by them, and I chose basically to fight them all because I was hoping to get some supplies and scavenge the area behind them. But of course, fighting also made me use what supplies I had, so it's probably a net negative. Now, here's something interesting. You do walk by this Halloween store, and if you remember back to Left Behind, this got Ellie so excited, but here she doesn't care. She's grown up, but it's also a painful memory. Now, here's a cool move. You can jump from above and land on an unsuspecting enemy, taking them out. Also, the dodge comes really handy in close quarters, especially when you have nothing. The key, though, is actually getting to close quarters, but once you are there, you can anticipate attacks with enemies swinging at you and just hit the dodge to avoid, following up with some melee. It's a good way to combat your lack of supplies. And oftentimes when you are at your last enemy, these enemies will grovel on the ground begging for their life, and Ellie will be able to take them out in a very violent way. She might be enjoying this too much, but this is something to bring up because you will notice that enemies will bring up each other's names throughout this game, and this is basically a way to humanize your enemies by hearing their names, by hearing that they actually cared about them. It makes you a little bit more empathetic, and especially in this game where it tries to get you to empathize with all sides, this is one of those tactics, but we'll see more of that later. After escaping this section, from here on, you will notice that the pathways are mostly narrow. And this tells me that they weren't really able to get too much further with their wide linear aspirations. You do get to this little maze section where you dodge tripwires, and it reminds you of Bill, of course. Good times. I wonder how Bill's been doing these days. And then you get to explore the TV station now. And as you go, it starts to finally start giving you some ammo. And really what this is doing is it's preparing me for a combat section that is most definitely coming. But I want to keep this ammo. I don't want to use it. So when the combat actually does happen, I decide to only take one of these guys out before ultimately making a run. And this does take some of my health, but it leads to a bit of a cinematic chase sequence here. So you're generally fine. And then you can run and get to the tunnels where suddenly it's dark and red and atmospheric, and I love it. You also get a chance here to pit the infected versus the WLF here, which is pretty nice and satisfying because I'm really tired of fighting these guys. So we're down in the underground tunnels, and you're gonna need to navigate the dank darkness. In this section, we do get a classic example of Naughty Dog making you feel smart, but in reality, they planned this all along. There's actually a really good video about this that I love by Robin Gaming, and it's basically about how Naughty Dog decides your decisions. Basically, what they do is they do kind of guide your hand through a lot of these levels, but it feels very natural, and it gives the player a sense that they actually discovered it for themselves. And so here is where we get some of this. We get a clear indication that we are supposed to go up this ladder. And so we throw a rope and we swing towards it. It becomes our main focal point for this section. But once you start to climb the ladder, you find that it is broken at the top. And so you can't get out that way. Only as you descend do you see the true path that you're supposed to take in the form of a door that you wouldn't otherwise see earlier because your eye was drawn elsewhere. Naughty Dog does a good job drawing your eye towards things in the level. Of course, yellow paint is the most basic and classic example, but they also use lighting and focal points to guide your way. It's so smart that they do not need to even put compasses or maps or anything to help the player find their way through. Players often are just able to find their way without getting lost, even when the path is not straight and clear. It's very impressive how they do this. But as we go, we also witness the WLF getting taken out by our next new threat, the Shamblers. And these are new to The Last of Us Part 2, and these guys are somewhere between a clicker and a bloater, but they release spores from their body, so it's pretty dangerous to get close. It's almost like these corrosive explosions, and they do take a good bit of damage in order to take out. And here, of course, as I've said many times, I suck at stealth, so I end up getting caught and having to use everything I have. And again, in the next section, I suck. But one thing I do sometimes to help myself out is I just start an encounter running around just so I can get the lay of the land to know where the heck I actually need to go. And this helps me get through and plan out how I'm actually going to get through this. In this case, I only had to use some of my supplies and I didn't even bother to stealth, but knowing the way out helped me actually do this. Now, as we are nearing the exit, there's a cinematic chase sequence and I try to just dip out on Dina and let her fend for herself, but I guess I'm supposed to help her. So we try this again and then we make our narrow escape. In all of this though, Ellie's gas mask was actually cracked. And so at this point, she has to admit to Dina that she is immune. And Dina has something to admit too. She's pregnant. They fight a bit about this as Ellie's reaction to Dina being pregnant is similar to Abby's reaction to Mel being pregnant in that they both kind of get a little bit nasty about it. Likely because they're both crushing on these people that are now having kids with someone else. But Dina needs some rest and this ends day one. And geez, this has been a day. I mean, they really make you feel like you barely made it to the other side. I don't know how I'm going to be able to get through this, especially as the game is going to get much harder. As the day is transitioning, Ellie has a flashback to 3 years ago with Joel as he's trying to surprise her for her birthday. And here you have a lot of that classic banter that you did in the original that we haven't really seen much in this game in the present. And one thing is Ellie can swim now. If you remember from the first game, she could not swim and you had to have her get on pallets in order to get her through water sections. Now, this is one of the most special parts of this whole game because it's the only time you really truly get to re-experience what it was like in the first game. Ellie is more youthful and innocent and Joel more living. And they get to a museum and this is where you see some dinosaurs and they play around with a cowboy hat that they find. They even make a little self-referential quip here about the sequel not being as good.
Did you see that in the movie too?
Actually, yeah. But a different one. See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.
They're talking about Jurassic Park though, not this game. But soon things get real fun because Ellie, who is obsessed with space, something that you might have picked up on in the first game through some of the dialogue between Ellie and Joel, is that she loves space. And Joel has really pulled out all the stops for this one. Here they climb into a lunar lander and he's found this cassette tape of one of the audio recordings from a space shuttle launch. And Ellie uses this to just imagine the takeoff. And this is absolutely a beautiful moment. Something I don't think that's really appreciated enough is that this is a video game and games can have us doing literally anything. Like Naughty Dog could have had us really going into Ellie's imagination, going to space, shooting lasers, anything. But here, Naughty Dog in the most subtle ways is having us just simply look at Ellie with just a little bit of lighting and shaking to immerse us in the experience. And this restraint really grounds us in this game. It makes moments like these all the more powerful and really emphasizes the point that they don't have technology these days. They don't have a whole lot. They really just have their imagination for these small, beautiful moments. From here, though, things take a weird turn back to reality. Of course, so far, this has felt like a dream, but we are still very much in a harsh post-apocalyptic world. So as you continue on into the wildlife section, and they kind of make you think you're going to run into infected, but it's actually a boar. But this section quickly reminds you of what is out there. And the kicker is the writing on all the walls that's talking about all the pain that is happening in this world. And you even see a symbol of the fireflies further defaced with the word liars. These guys were supposed to save the world, but they didn't. And it's a reminder that this is all really Joel's fault. In the first game, there was a ray of hope in the world that the Fireflies stood for, but Joel extinguished that light at the very end. And so in the second game, there's no sign of any hope. The first game had this noble purpose, this quest that the characters were going on. But in this game, we're just out for revenge. Essentially, it's a pointless pursuit. And I think that might be the intention here. Like the whole game at times can just feel pointless. Like, what are we doing here? It can make you feel a little bit lost. And it's like, well, yeah, Joel did that. There was a point. It was set up in the first game, but he said, fuck that. And so here we are stuck with characters that have nothing better to do than to just try to get revenge. And although this flashback started as something beautiful, it's brought us back to reality and back to our revenge plot for day 2. So day 2 begins, and one thing you always want to try to do at the start of a Naughty Dog level is turn around and go immediately behind you. There's often some kind of reward, and that is something that they have been doing since Crash Bandicoot 1. Now, we're on our own here because Dina is sick and pregnant, and one of the things here is it does feel a little bit plot devicey, like Naughty Dog is just trying to put Dina out of commission, but kind of keep her around for some story beats so that Ellie can do this day on her own. Of course, it's also there to parallel some of the things we see on the Abby side, but it is a bit of a shame because Dina, who I really like as a character, kind of fades from importance, at least largely for the rest of this Seattle section, and we don't really get that many cool more moments with her. But as we go, we get these 2 very cool, interesting foreshadowing, which gives us a hint that we're going to be getting a bow soon. First thing we see is an archery trophy, which is a hint that someone who had a bow is around. The next thing we see a little bit later. But soon we get to combat, and now we have to fight dogs. And I hate dogs. Not in real life. In real life, I love dogs, but the dogs in this game are so hard to deal with. They can sniff you out so that basically they can lead their owner straight to you. So you constantly have to stay mobile ahead of their tracking. And that's not good for my scared ass who likes to camp it out and take my time and find an angle to fight. In this case, I just can't really take all these guys out. So I look for a stealth path, and of course, it doesn't really work. They see me, but somehow as I run to the exit, they're still looking for me down the street where I had broken stealth, and I managed to slip by. I will just chalk that up to good luck. I'm not going to question it any further because I want to keep my ammo, so let's move on. In the next area, we are looting, but Naughty Dog is going to subvert our expectations here. See, we are used to, as The Last of Us players, having these combat sections and looting sections and having them pretty separate, where you actually can expect danger in the combat sections and peace in the looting sections. But here, they've decided to mix them into one. So when we enter the area here, no one is initially around, but we end up looting a basement with shamblers, and when we are done with that, now infected are out on the street. After killing those guys, we think we are safe now, but no, if you loot the back room here, suddenly infected are coming after you. And then finally, there is this big risk, big reward room that has like 6 to 7 runners in it. And at this point, I'm just like, can't I just loot in peace? But I go through with this because there is a big reward. And here we actually get our short arm holster, so now we can switch easily between our pistols, and basically at this point we can have 4 guns equipped, ready to go. Cool. Now here's our second foreshadowing spot for the bow, where we see an arrow and we're able to grab one ahead of time before we have even gotten the bow. But we have one more combat section, and this is where you can really easily exploit the dodge. And this even works on grounded. You can see these guys visibly swinging at you and use that to hit dodge, followed by melee, and just rinsing and repeating while in combat like this works very well. The only problem is there are multiple enemies here, but I found that even spamming the dodge and melee button back and forth over and over kind of works, and I was able to take 3 out this way. It's a good tactic, although not something that really works well on stalkers, and this one will not stop attacking, and you really can't dodge your way through for this guy. That's okay though, we'll give him the old shotgun and grab finally the bow from him. And this might actually be the bow guy that won that trophy, infected, a long time ago. But who cares, we have a new weapon in our arsenal. Okay, so we make our way to this little Hillcrest neighborhood, and there is a ton of enemies here. And this section is pretty tough, but to be honest, I'm just planning to run through this. There are a lot of encounters that you can do this. There are a lot where you can't because you often have to open the exit door and it takes some time to get open, so you really can't just blow through it. But here you can. Although on grounded, of course, the enemies are good at both spotting and shooting you. So while you can still pull it off, it's often very sloppy. But especially when possible, I will do this because it just allows allows you to save on ammo, and if you can get far enough into the story, you will get your health back. If you get through essentially a day, you wake up the next day with your health back. So that's what we do. We just run. Even past a section where they throw smoke, I can just kind of slide by before they catch on and jump down to the section where someone grabs you and tells you to shush. It's a very drawn out reveal. We find out that it's Jesse. Now, this particular section is actually pretty controversial because this part was in the marketing of the game, but instead of Jesse, this was Joel. And a lot of people were upset by this because, well, it misleads you into thinking Joel is going to be coming with you on the main part of the journey. It makes you think that Ellie's revenge quest is to go seek revenge for someone else, and Joel is actually following you, kind of like how that initial trailer also led you to believe. But of course, he dies so early, and that's not going to happen here. Now, the excuse behind this is they wanted to obfuscate the story and just throw the viewer off and try to let the story be fresh for players so they didn't know what would happen. And I get that to an extent, but at the same time, this was pretty bad. People were very much expecting a Joel and Ellie story with The Last of Us Part 2, and I mean, this still is to an extent, but since they decided to go this different and more risky route, they really shouldn't have tried to lead players on in this way. To me, it did piss me off a little, but it wasn't the end of the world. Just, feels bad a bit because clearly this trickery might have convinced more people to buy this game that otherwise maybe would have passed on this. But so it's actually Jesse here, and so we need to sneak to a car, and here you basically get The Last of Us's version of a set piece. In Uncharted, Naughty Dog does these huge bombastic set pieces that have all this cinematic action, explosions, and button prompts to keep the player engaged in the moment. But in The Last of Us, I love how Naughty Dog here says, we still want to have these moments, but this game is grounded in realism. So it will be done at that more grounded level. And it really does work. You still have that very exciting and intense set piece that's just beautiful to watch. You escape from the WLF only to alert infected, and now they are your primary enemy that you will need to be fighting. And then ultimately you drive into a pond and need to swim to shore. At this point, we take Jesse back to Dina, and this leads to the next flashback from 2 years prior. This one starts with Ellie and Tommy, who are clearing enemies from afar with a sniper rifle. And this is interesting. You are sniping at a distance, so you have to fight with this bullet drop in order to take out the infected. This section does feel a bit like a tutorial for something that will occur in the future, for gameplay that we're going to be getting a lot more of. But honestly, no, this is the only time you ever use this rifle or deal with this bullet drop mechanic. Feels like maybe there were more plans for this, but it didn't make it into the game. It may have also been something to prepare you for the multiplayer that got scrapped, and is a sore subject. I don't want to talk about it. This section is fun though, so ultimately I will let it slide. Now here Tommy kind of sets you up to meet with Joel, as there has been a lot of awkwardness going on between the two. But Ellie does ultimately agree to go with Joel to look for some guitar strings. So you take off at first on horseback, but then you need to cut through a hotel. Now here we find that Joel has been training Ellie a bit, making her put on a mask, even though she definitely doesn't need it, because they're trying to hide the fact that she is immune from people. Now I'm not sure if this is to cover up that he's killed fireflies or to just not make her a target. It's most likely the latter, but they do make some calculation that it's probably would be bad for her secret to get out. At this point though, you're about to hit some danger, and you can tell that danger is coming because they really start to stock you up on ammo. Now first you have to fight through this hotel lobby area, and you need to fight waves of infected. And this is fine. You get plenty of ammo and you can kind of just run around in circles. It's not too bad. Next though, you get deeper and there is this bloater fight. And this one is weird because, well, you're actually supposed to lose, specifically to the bloater here. And I knew this in advance, so I tried to die to it to just get through it. But I think there is some time or some damage threshold you need to deal to the bloater first before you can pass to the next section. You also have to deal with the occasional runners too, so it makes it hard to gauge. But the weird thing is I think if you were good enough, you could continually fight this bloater and just continue to avoid him over and over again in perpetuity. So it's a little bit weird here because it does kind of penalize you the better you are at this game. because you do need to get caught by him in order to advance, because what that's going to do is it's going to allow Joel to show you how badass he still is and take this bad boy out with a machete. Now, once you get through, you get to this cutscene with Joel and Ellie, and they discover this couple who had left Jackson a while back. And they left because they were tired of the safety in Jackson and hearing about how bad it was out in the real world, and they wanted to make a real difference. Now, I don't buy this story for a second, because really you're just going to put your whole life in danger, but this prompts Ellie to think about the Fireflies again and how they represented restoring hope. And Ellie has been questioning what Joel told her, and perhaps this is why she has been really so strange towards him lately. Joel had said to Ellie that dozens of people were immune, but questioned why she never met anyone else. Of course, though, I don't know how many people she actually knows, as she's been pretty much confined to Jackson this whole time, but she's basically just trying to poke holes in his story, and also wants to know why she was just rushed away by Joel. She never really got to even talk to the Fireflies. Joel just reaffirms what he said.
There was no cure. There's nothing that could help these people or anybody else. I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different. But they ain't.
Of course, she is skeptical. Now, it's funny because so far these flashbacks seem to be actually more important to the core of the actual story of The Last of Us Part 2 than what is going on in the present of the revenge quest. The flashbacks are actually the real continuation of the aftermath of Part 1 and Joel's decision. And while, yes, the revenge quest is also part of the aftermath, it's more the aftermath of Joel's death. And this just kind of continues to emphasize this feeling of pointlessness in what is going on right now versus what was an integral part of the first story, which is Ellie's immunity. This immune girl is special and might be able to impact the world, but right now she's kind of wasting that just trying to get revenge. It's what sometimes makes me not appreciate this story, because what is more interesting to me is this window dressing on the side, these flashbacks. Of course, this feeling is partially shared by characters in the story as Dina starts to get frustrated at Ellie for wanting to continue on with this revenge quest. And I do think part of this is intentional by Naughty Dog. Like, I think they want us to question what we're doing and want us to kind of feel like we don't want to keep going at certain points of the game, especially as things get more violent and especially as they show Ellie doing worse and worse things. But Naughty Dog is still forcing us to do all those things. It's weird, especially as they worked so hard to get us aligned with Ellie. Now they're trying to get us to become unaligned with her. We'll talk more about this, but they're essentially trying to deconstruct our attachment and our appreciation for Ellie and trying to get us to really see the other side of things. Whether that works is an open question at this point. So even though now you have Dina and Jesse with you, you still are taking off on your own because Dina is still sick and Jesse is hurt. So we still have this convenient way to keep Ellie alone. And she is going to try to get to this hospital where they think Abby might be. Now, you get to some pretty cool puzzle and looting sections here, many of which are actually totally optional, but as usual, the risk is worth the reward. First, we have this little rope puzzle where we need to knock out the glass in order to allow us to swing a rope over the rafters and climb up. And I should mention, Naughty Dog has really done their research here. These glass rafters are all over Seattle. They basically are there to shield from the rain, which is happening all the time there. There's plenty more Seattle design in this game, of course, but I remember when I initially played this thinking this is just convenient, just put here. But when I actually visited Seattle and saw these, it makes a lot of sense. And it really is a testament to how much detail Naughty Dog's developers go through in order to make a realistic experience. Okay, so you loot up here, and then there's this whole building crawling with infected. And for this one, the only real way I can see to get inside is to break some glass. And this will alert the infected. And this did happen the first time, but I, well, kind of screwed up and died. So I tried this a second time, but this time it didn't alert anyone. I was in the far window and guess I got lucky, but this allowed me to stealth kill all of them and get the loot. Another cool area is we get to this building, and this one annoyed me a little bit because the door is locked, but clearly there isn't even glass there. Ellie can just kind of reach through and unlock the door herself. But anyways, we have to crawl around and loot around, and it's really funny how Naughty Dog got me on this one. I was legitimately excited because I had not seen a workbench in a while, and I've been really desperate to upgrade my bow. I always upgrade the bow as soon as I get it because that's usually one of the hardest handling weapons. But this workbench subverts your expectations because as you are crafting, you get attacked and you end up having to kill these WLF deserters who I guess think you are there somehow to force them to go back. Once I take care of them though, I can do the workbench for real. And there's this other mini puzzle where you need to break a window and walk and jump to a ledge to get over it and to get to a safe. And this safe is even kind of fun. As you look for the combo, there's a calendar with important dates and it says October 8th, 2013 is the 30th anniversary. And of course, at first I start putting in 10/08/13 for 2013, but then I realize this is the 30th, meaning they got married 30 years ago, so I need to put 83 for 1983 in order to get it. Now, those puzzles were totally optional. You could totally miss them, but the next one you do need to solve, and this is where you have to roll a trash can up a little incline and let it run down while you race to open the garage door just in time for it to roll past, and then you can use it on the other side in order to climb the wall. This is a fun, interesting puzzle. I like this one, and I'm sure it won't be followed by complete danger in combat. Okay, so of course we get to combat, and as we creep into a building, we are hit with a bunch of stalkers. These are the worst kind of infected, as they basically try to hide from you, and they purposely try to get at you when you don't expect it and when you're not looking. And these guys are honestly too scary for me. So we're going to use two items to get by: a bottle and a trap mine. We use a bottle for the first area, which will allow me to stun one stalker who's trying to stop me on my way, and I'll run straight to the window, break, and escape. The next room has them also, and the escape door is kind of close, but I still need some time in order to open it. So I run to that door and I lay one trap mine just before I get there, and that gives me enough time to open it and play the escape cinematic through the river and down into the sewers. And this section actually used to be a much longer level where essentially you would have had to work your way up against a lot of currents and through a lot of pipes in order to get further. You can get a chance to play that in the lost levels of the remastered version, but they cut a lot of this section out, and I think it makes sense. It was a little bit too much. But here you do get a brief risk reward where you swim down and you can get to a secret room, and here you have the luxury to encounter yet another stalker, but you will get some parts and supplies, but honestly not much that I needed, and I don't think it was worth the reward this time. But you get through the sewers, and now we have to face the Seraphites. We'll learn much more about them as we go, but this is another faction of people that are roaming Seattle. And they use these creepy whistles, and they tend to have more primitive weaponry, such as bow and arrows. One bow will get you right in the shoulder, and you actually get introduced to this new mechanic where you have to remove arrows from your body. Here, I just am ready to run, so you can tell I get impatient with stealth sometimes, quite often, and that does hurt me a little bit. I do end up with low health here, but we get through. Now that you've been slightly introduced to the Seraphites, you need to really meet them. And you actually fight this pretty long section with them. And so I determined that I'm going to use stealth, at least as much as I can. So I use my bow and arrow in addition to a silenced pistol in order to go for them. Now, one thing about the bow is you should, if you can, go for headshots, because if you can, oftentimes you can actually retrieve your arrow. If you were to hit them in the body, they're more prone to break. They still will break if you get a headshot, but it's a little bit less likely. And this part that I'm playing through, this was actually shown off in the gameplay trailer for this game. And what's crazy is how in that marketing, much of it just seemed like too good to be true. It seemed very scripted. Oftentimes devs put their best foot forward and even embellish gameplay in these vertical slices that don't often end up being the actual game. And what Naughty Dog showed here was this variety of combat, this cinematic cinematics of combat, and it just seemed too good to be true, and it seemed scripted. What's amazing though is how they actually, for the most part, pulled that level of combat off in the main game. I mean, everything you see in that gameplay trailer can actually be done. Although, at least for me, it's done in a much sloppier fashion. But we do manage to get through. We managed to get to this door where this Seraphite is waiting for you, and I managed to take all of them out, but I end up using a lot of supplies. But as we make our way to the next section, I realize I'm actually quite stocked up on crafting materials. And this is actually pretty rare for Grounded. But when you do start to max out, it's wise to start crafting items so that you can hold more materials. I often don't craft too much until I really need something, because you never know what you're actually going to need, and you often have to make a choice between items. Like, will I need more health, or do I want to use a Molotov? These are some of the key questions that you can only really find out as you see what encounter you're about to get into. Next, we do have this chance to get a lockbox, and this stocks us up even further, and you can tell we are in for a real treat in terms of combat. Now, swimming to the WLF base, we do come across this wolf who is listening to music and playing video games, and she can't hear us swimming behind her. We ultimately do have to kill her though, because she tries to attack us, and she ends up dropping her PS Vita, which has Hotline Miami playing in the background. It's an interesting Easter egg for Naughty Dog, especially because most of their Easter eggs reference their own games. But we need to stock up now, because the next section has Ellie facing down a ton of wolves. The section is tough, really tough. And while I'm sure you can stealth, I only really try that at the beginning. I end up getting caught pretty early and have to fight through a ton of people. Now, I am using up so many materials and health kits too, which is a shame because I know I am near the end of the day. This is kind of the end of it, but I gotta do it. I also do fail a bit, but even on Grounded, they tend to checkpoint you if you're able to kill some enemies and then get back into stealth for a little bit. And so you can actually use this to get through some of these sections. But this could be kind of a good or a bad thing, because basically in order to get to where I got to, my sloppy ass ended up wasting all these bullets. So checkpointing me here does mean I've used up a lot of my resources, but it does get me closer to the end, and you can of course restart the whole encounter if you want to try to do it again without wasting so much. Finally though, I am able to run to the exit, and I have killed enough of them and also got enough of them lost enough so that they don't know exactly where I am, and so I'm able to get out safely. At this point, we are closing in on one of Abby's friends, Nora, who did help kill Joel, and we finally go through some rafters crawling through to finally encounter her. Now, Nora is interesting, as she definitely won't go down without a fight, and she doesn't mind pressing your buttons, as she says things like Joel got what he deserved. She does try to escape though, leading to a pretty cool cinematic chase sequence through the hospital, jumping around, and it's like the Robert chase sequence in the first game, but longer and much cooler. Eventually though, we get through and we get to a dead end with a pit full of spores, and Ellie has to make a quick choice as wolves are about to close in on them. Ellie will be able to breathe the spores, of course, as she is immune, but Nora will not, and so this is basically her slow death sentence. You jump down with Nora, but she gets away for a little bit, and this forces you to contend with some of the wolves and the infected roaming around. I love the red yet again in this darkness. It's so atmospheric, and I am so sloppy in this section, but I do manage to squeeze past the door and finally get to Nora. At this point, as Nora lays dying from spores, she realizes that Ellie is that immune girl, the one that could have saved all of humanity. Nora used to be a Firefly. In fact, all of Abby's friends are basically ex-Fireflies. And what happens here is actually a pretty crazy, unsettling feeling. This immune girl, with her gift, is going around executing this group of ex-Fireflies, a group that stood for hope, who were once actively trying to find a cure. And instead of doing anything positive with her gift, she's on this revenge quest. It feels like a waste of her gift. After all she's been through, it has been for nothing. I think it's something that Nora sees in this moment, and she even continues to say that Joel's decision has damned so many lives. Ellie is ignoring all of that though, and she just wants Nora to give up Abby's location, but she's not willing to do that. So we do have this moment where Ellie is basically deciding she's going to torture Nora with a pipe as she lays there dying. You as the player don't see this actually happening. Instead, Naughty Dog puts the camera on Ellie, and we get to see that pure hatred coursing through her veins. We see as she breathes up, as she feels the intensity, and all we see is that small prompt there. Press square to torture, square again, and square for the final blow. Now this is crazy intense and unfortunately pretty immersive. And as the player, you might be in different places in your journey with this game. Perhaps you are still very much upset about Joel and thus you are more down for these actions. But perhaps you are starting to see that this revenge quest is kind of pointless and thus you're kind of reluctant to hit these buttons. Regardless though, Naughty Dog has decided what you must do next to advance the story. In some ways this is actually beautiful. In no other medium can you feel so personally attached to what the character is doing. With things like movies, you are passive, just watching what others are doing. You have no control over their actions, but not in video games. In here, Naughty Dog is forcing your hands, forcing you as the player to press the buttons and cause the very things that you may not want to have happen. Of course, you may not want to go through with this, but then the story will not progress. And this won't be the first time Naughty Dog is forcing you to do things that you might not want to. In fact, there's an almost full half of the game that many people didn't want to experience, but we will get there. So after this, you eventually come back home and you're recovering, and Ellie is in extreme shock as she herself is even shaken by the actions she just went through. But she was able to find out Abby's location, so those actions did, in some ways, pay off. But as we close day 2, this brings us to the next flashback for Ellie. And this is a flashback of Ellie 2 years prior, having let her curiosity get the better of her. And she is determined now to know, once and for all, what went down with the Fireflies. She rummages through the remains in the very places that Joel once stood. And you come up to the very familiar red door with the Firefly logo and straight into the operating room that if you played the first game, you remember all too well. As you enter, you see the blood stain on the floor of the doctor that Joel had brutally murdered. And you retrieve a tape recording of, I'm pretty sure, Abby saying that they only knew of one immune person, but the doctor who could make the cure was now dead. And one thing is kind of weird here. They do talk in this recording about knowledge of the smuggler and the little girl, and even the thought of going after them. And although they say it's not going to make a difference with the doctor being dead, it's clear that they have some inkling of who these people are, and this kind of reinforces to me that, well, maybe they should have known people would show up one day to come after Joel and Ellie. And wouldn't this have put them a little bit more on alert to outsiders? Now, perhaps Ellie never shared this with Joel because she is mad at him from this point on, as in this moment when he chases after her, she gets him to admit the full truth that he had kept from her.
Making a vaccine would have killed you. So I stopped them.
And Ellie just feels sick to her stomach. Perhaps Ellie in some ways wanted to be found so she could offer herself up for a cure one day should they happen to find another doctor. Perhaps in the present she may also feel some guilt that Joel was able to save her, but she was unable to save Joel. Either way, clearly there were survivors that might come for Joel one day. But this also explains the full-on strain in the relationship between Joel and Ellie that we have mostly only really been hinted at so far. It also reaffirms that like surrogate father, like surrogate daughter, as Ellie has proven to be just as violent as her father figure, both of which feeling that their actions are totally justified. These flashbacks honestly are where we have some of the most intriguing storytelling, and I wish it wasn't so much the window dressing to the main story. These moments are what feel like what the main story should be. When I pictured The Last of Us Part 2 before this game even came out, I thought this would be a story about Ellie on a solo quest to find the Fireflies, with Joel trying desperately to find her and stop her despite deep strains in their relationship. These parts parts of the story I find more intriguing, and it feels a bit lost from the focus in this tale. Although, as I said, perhaps intentionally, because we are all victims now to Joel's decision. But as this flashback ends, it gives us a lot of clarity. And day 3 starts, and by now you have recovered from your night out torturing people and ready for a brand new day of mayhem. As you're walking in the theater, you walk by a poster for a movie that Joel had loved watching, and you enter into the backstage area, which you can tell will be a combat area later by the fact that they have all these crouching areas and wall cracks. You go to talk to Jesse, who has pieced together that Dina is pregnant by this point, and he tells Ellie that they need to bring her back so she can get some care. But Ellie doesn't want to leave Tommy alone in the city, although secretly, I also don't think she wants to stop getting her revenge. And so Jesse says, fuck it, let's just go get Tommy. I'm sorry, but fuck what exactly? You just admitted your friend really needs medical attention, but fuck it, she can wait. At this point, it doesn't seem like either of them really care that much about her well-being. One thing here with Dina is, yeah, she is such a big part of the initial story, but with her being sick, she is just so put in the background now. And this also is just allowing Naughty Dog to conveniently switch up who your buddy will be for day 3. This isn't the only time that it feels like these characters are just plot devices to get the story to go a certain way. Like, you know, her being out of commission in day 2 kind of makes the events easier to script out, and it gets Ellie alone with Nora so she can do those unspeakable things. Having Dina out of the picture here for day 3 adds some variety as you switch it up to now be with Jesse. It also allows you to put Ellie and Dina's budding relationship in the background of your mind and focus now on revenge. So you go with Jesse, and there is an interesting conversation that takes place as Jesse asks why Abby and her crew were even coming for Joel. And Ellie, who does know the full picture, kind of just half explains the situation. That Joel and the Fireflies got into some argument over cargo. That cargo, of course, being Ellie, though. Now, Jesse asks Ellie pointedly, does that knowledge change anything for you? And she very quickly, without hesitation, says, nope.
That change anything for you?
Nope.
But this realization that these are the Fireflies coming after Joel, I wonder if it would cause more conflict within her, because as we just saw in the flashback, she was very conflicted over Joel's decision, especially that the decision was made for her without her consent. And now she knows these people came to kill him over that very decision. Her fondness for Joel at this point in the present now seems solidified, and it makes you think that maybe now she believes he was in the right. Perhaps, though, the thirst for revenge has infected her mind, but I do find this interesting, and I wonder what caused her to care so much about this Firefly stuff, so much that she would run away and ask all these questions, to now sort of not be asking any questions and being sternly in the Joel camp. Perhaps that is what love does to us, and especially when that love is taken away. From here, there is a small combat section, and I kind of hate this because I know I won't be able to stealth well, but I want to keep my ammo, and well, ultimately I do fight at a great cost, and I lose a lot of health and a lot of ammo. But it's now time for some quality time with Jesse. You have this little risk-reward section with this optional infected encounter. And interestingly, you can climb to this elevation such that they can't actually get to you. But there is a med kit and a machete, so this area is worth it. Plus, you can climb again and just leave Jesse to fight them forever if you want. Moving on, we get to a bookstore, and you get to have some fun optional conversations with Jesse and learn a little bit more about him. We also learn about how Joel used to think Ellie and Jesse had a thing for each other and would date, but little did he know the truth about Ellie. They also talk about how mushrooms weren't such a scary thing pre-outbreak, and about how Jesse's mom used to make up stories with multiple endings for books that she read to him. A little foreshadowing for this game, perhaps? Perhaps definitely not. And then we get one more encounter, which I managed to get caught, but re-enter stealth, and that felt pretty good. That is something hard to remember, but once you get caught, there is an ability for you to kind of run away, go back into hiding, and get back into stealth, only with the enemies a little bit more on alert, but still not knowing exactly where you are. And you can enter back in and out to be effective in combat. But we get through that, and then we see this boat that we plan to steal. And in that process, we hear rumors of where Tommy is. But Tommy is actually in the other direction, not at the aquarium where we expect Abby to be. So Jesse and Ellie get into it a little bit because for Jesse, the whole point of this day's excursion is to go get Tommy. And Ellie acts like the best way to get Tommy is to actually go for Abby, but of course that's kind of bullshit. Either way, this is weird because Jesse just kind of dips out on her without putting up much of a fight or anything or having any sort of serious discussion. I guess in some ways he knows that she might not be able to be convinced, but after such nice conversations and seemingly pleasant banter throughout the whole day, it's like, okay, bye. It's just a little quick and abrupt. But so now we're separated, and this is a very tough section where you need to get to a boat in this abandoned and flooded mall. And it's actually a very well-designed area, and it actually adds a new stealth mechanic here as there is water and swimming. And because there are many pockets of this water in this mall, you can use your swimming to sneak around and even get some flanks in. But you can't fully sneak underwater to get straight to the boat because it's a little bit sectioned off. You will have to go up a floor and then back down. But one thing that's pretty cool is I love that if you do get caught, you can dive back in the water and swim around to another section, and this will ultimately kind of re-enter you back into stealth. My stealth really sucks, so I end up just taking a bunch out and wasting a lot of ammo. And at this point, I've used up so much ammo that I am committed to clearing all the enemies in here because afterwards I'm going to need to scavenge the area for more bullets. And that's exactly what I do before hopping in the boat and taking off. And I love this part because you get to use this boat to traverse around a little bit. This feels like a good area that could have been more of a wide linear-ish type area, but it's definitely quite a bit more linear than wide. Because while you do get to boat around in the water and explore a bit, you still kind of get dragged in one direction by the current, and it's definitely not as open as I'm sure they probably maybe even had in mind if they had had more time. But this section is still pretty fun. You get to stop around and explore a little bit along the way. At some point, the boat actually stops working and you have to start it up again. And this is important foreshadowing for later. This indicates to the player that the boat is old and perhaps has lost a step. The kind of hint that you might want for some specific type of character to help explain something that happens later. I hope you catch my drift here. Now, there is a small Seraphite fight, and these motherfuckers have Molotovs, so they get me pretty bad. But I pull through, just camping a lot and letting them come to me. There is a pretty cool puzzle I should call out where you have to climb this subway train, which, well, I don't know exactly how they managed to get it into this position, this super high elevation, but I'm sure Naughty Dog, with their attention to detail, has some sort of explanation for this. But next, we continue on and we get to this arcade. Now, young Ellie, the Ellie from the first game, would have been all over this, but she's grown up and she's on her revenge quests, so she's just ready to clear the path and move on. But there is all this cool stuff that she just would have loved. It's kind of sad, actually. It kind of makes you feel like her childhood is lost. There's even this Jack X combat racing game, which is very cool, and the turning game, which is one that she pretended to play with Riley in the Left Behind DLC for the first game. But here we are collecting ammo to give us enough to get through clearly an upcoming combat section. And they actually trick you here, making you think that you need to push this cart to get to an opening, but the floor actually collapses below you. And this is where we find a bloater just chilling there. Now, I knew something about this part, and that is that, well, this is the last combat part for the day, and honestly, for a while with Ellie. So I have stocked up and I plan to just use everything I have. And that helps me very quickly kill the bloater and his runner accomplices. So we get through and now we're finally able to get to the aquarium where it is starting to storm something mad fierce. And there are these rolling waves too, making it very hard to traverse. Now this boat eventually fails and so you have to swim. And see, this is what I wish they did more with Joel. Here, they clearly set up the fact that this boat has lost a thing or two, that it's old, that it's falling apart by having it fail on us a little bit earlier back. In this game though, there's not really much evidence that Joel has lost a step or two in his old age, to have given himself up and been so easily trusting. If anything, we see him still being a badass, killing a bloater with his bare hands in this flashback. You know, maybe he could have struggled a bit more in that section and needed Ellie's help or something, or made a dumb decision that got everyone into a mess. So we can at least say, oh, he is getting a bit old. Anyways, Anyways, the death of Joel and how it went down still gets to me, but perhaps that is the point, because in real life, when we lose someone, we go through that scenario in our heads over and over again as to what could have happened differently. In some ways, I can respect that, but in others, I feel like it's a bit of a cop-out to just say life is random sometimes, and therefore, however the story is written is completely fine. Okay, side tangent, but now we are getting into the aquarium, and there's a bit of a red herring here, as you are collecting a ton of supplies as you go. And it's actually interesting. I want you to remember this part, this very specific part of collecting things at this point, because I do think it represents a missed opportunity that would have been really cool if they had done this. But I won't be able to come back to that for a long moment. And let's hope I actually remember to refer back to it. But here you get jumped by a dog and you kill it. And then you run into two of Abby's friends instead of Abby. So Abby actually isn't there right now. This is Mel and Owen. And you hold them up and you are asking about Abby's whereabouts. And Ellie plans to do that map thing that Joel and Tommy used to do. Remember, she mentioned this much earlier in the game to Dina, and we saw Joel do it in part 1. So she's planning to have Mel point to where Abby is and have Owen verbally say it. And if the stories match, they are safe. But Owen wants to be a hero, and so he tries to fight Ellie and she shoots him. And then Mel attacks her with a knife, so you knife her and she dies, and so too does Owen. But before he's able to die, he says the word pregnant, because Mel is pregnant. Essentially, they're trying to humanize Mel in that one little moment, and Ellie feels really sick about it. But before you can linger too long, Tommy and Jesse are there, and they have come to rescue you. Jesse must have found Tommy when they split up, and they must have decided to rescue her before going back to the theater. Now, in all the commotion, Ellie conveniently just leaves the map, which also very conveniently has marked on it exactly where she is. And this is so fucking convenient. It bothers me so much, but it's not something I can talk about yet. We're gonna have to talk about a lot more things before we get back to that. So you do get back and you rest up in the theater and you go to talk with Tommy and Jesse. And here Tommy is feeling pretty good, feeling like he got enough revenge and they don't need to continue on getting Abby. And this is also where he feels a bit plot device-y, because as we will find out later, he's not quite done with Abby. But that will have to wait, because Abby is actually here and she just kills Jesse so fast and sudden, and this character is just like done, like nothing, like he's just gone. His whole character, his whole progress to the story, I mean, he is just done. And it makes you feel like he was just kind of a plot device and a means to just have Dina get pregnant and sick, a means to show the gruesomeness of this little revenge battle that's taking place, and getting him conveniently out of the picture will also allow the whole baby raising thing to happen, which would have gotten a little complicated. And maybe I'm being a bit too hard here, but it just feels like a very unceremonious death of a very cool character and a little bit plot devicey. Now, Abby also hurts Tommy and she's able to disarm Ellie. And she says something stupid like, "You wasted your chance. We let you live." That chance was for what exactly is my question. And if you can tell, I'm a little bit irritated. It's because I know what's coming. And this is a very long ass section, almost half the game to be precise, where I am now being forced to play as Joel and now Jesse's killer, Abby. And up to this point, Naughty Dog has given me absolutely no reason to like her at all in the slightest. Even before she killed Joel, she was kind of being whiny and annoying with Owen. And then of course, what happened with Joel. And then this last moment, I kind of get it. Like I was getting sick of all the revenge taking place on everyone. But now Naughty Dog is forcing me to be with and start empathizing with this other character. Now, this is intentional, of course. Naughty Dog has already been attempting to get you to deconstruct your attachment to Ellie and Joel a little bit by showing Ellie doing all these gruesome things and by having characters explain the ramifications and why what Joel did was bad. And they're now trying to reconstruct and create empathy and a new attachment to Abby. You can see this a mile away, especially with some of the brutal acts that Ellie had to do, including just now killing a pregnant Mel. And throughout the story, they just make it harder and harder to feel like Joel was right in his actions. But as the players, I don't think we're quite there yet. So much of this gameplay is going to be us going against what we want to do. It's kind of interesting how they play with this. It's definitely a risk, but it also is annoying as a player. And even if it does end up paying off, doesn't mean that you don't have an annoying start to the next 3 days. And there is a storytelling aspect of this that makes it quite jarring and harder to enjoy, but we will get there as we go. So, to try to kind of get an easy, quick win in getting us to empathize with Abby, we are shown her 4 years prior as essentially still an innocent child, and definitely not quite as yoked yet. She's looking for her dad at the zoo, and she wants to open this gate, and even though she can unlock it by passing through, something that bothered me so much so that I tried to get into photo mode to prove that you could get in, but it wasn't really working. So instead, Abby goes around and does some roof hopping to get through. Now, after falling in the mud, her dad comes around and they share some banter. Now, in some ways, this banter mirrors Joel and Sarah a little bit, and Joel and Ellie, of course, which shows the father-daughter parallel that exists here. Even going as far as to have her dad mentioning that he notices she has a crush on Owen, similar to how Joel had done the same thing, although incorrectly, with Ellie and Jesse. And we also get to have this beautiful moment rescuing a zebra mom from a barbed wire fence and returning her to her newborn baby. It's somewhat reminiscent of the giraffe scene in The Last of Us Part 1, and soon we learn this makes sense because this is the exact same zoo that the giraffes were held at, because these people are the fireflies inhabiting the hospital on the very day that Joel and Ellie arrive to town. Now, Owen is there to warn this to Abby's father, Jerry, who is a doctor, and so he goes to meet with Marlene to explain that the only way to remove this immune specimen and create a cure is to kill Ellie. And we can now see that Marlene was actually torn up about this. She does seem very hardened in the first game, but here we see she actually cares about Ellie. She didn't really want to do this, although she's still willing to go through with it. So perhaps she's not as bad and ready to kill Ellie as we might have thought from Joel's perspective. Jerry and Marlene, though, get into this sort of trolley problem debate, like, would Jerry sacrifice his daughter for the fate of the world? And while he doesn't say it, he kind of implies that he likely would. And when Abby walks in, she says she would definitely do it. It's much easier to say this when in reality, you know, this isn't you and this isn't your daughter that are going through this. And one thing that kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way is how much they present in this moment Jerry as being this noble, virtuous person, this perfect guy who is just funny and does everything right, and Abby as well as being this perfect daughter, really trying to show them as good so that you can kind of understand why they would think Joel and Ellie are bad. And so now we get to see from Abby's perspective everything that went down in the hospital that day, with Joel killing her father, the Dr. Jerry, right there in the hospital. And we see her innocence transformed 4 years later into the killer that we witnessed at the beginning of the game. Revenge has clearly consumed this girl for years, much like revenge is consuming Ellie now. But in this moment, after killing Joel, and as her friends are debating what to do with Ellie and Tommy, she is releasing those years of tension, and she decides to let them go. What's weird though is they somehow didn't really make the connection that Ellie was maybe this immune girl. Perhaps there was nothing they could do about it since they didn't have a doctor, but anyways, that's definitely something that they were all kind of aware of, and you think that one of them would make the connection. But now we flash to day one in Seattle. The same day, 2 days prior, that Ellie and Dina arrived to Seattle, but now it's time to experience these exact same days from Abby's perspective. And she is sleeping in some back room because, well, her roommate Manny had a girl over the night before. But these two have been called to the front, so they need to get going. You see, Abby and Manny are both a part of the WLF, or Wolves, and we actually get to see what it's like inside this WLF base. And it's very much a lot like Jackson. And this shows that there is a community here that has found a way to survive. They have the luxury of gyms, they have classrooms for kids, and a big cafeteria hall. And all those people that Ellie has been killing along her journey in those 3 days are people here that laugh and have fun and have families. They're not just evil goons like we would be killing mindlessly in a normal video game. Now here we see Jordan, who is still alive at this point, and he's playing Jak and Daxter on his PS Vita. And dang, he's good. He's not even looking at the screen while he's playing. Now it's interesting, he mentions to Abby that he is heading to the Severna Hotel and clearing out that area, as well as the school area where we know that he will be running into Ellie a little bit later. He also mentions Leah being over at the TV station. We also get to meet Manny's father, and this is interesting because, again, the fact that they have been able to reform civilization, find a way to survive, and enough to be able to care for elderly shows that they have made some place special here. Now we get in line for a burrito, and Manny and Abby jump the line, which doesn't really put points on the board for me liking them, but that's kind of a small thing. And one thing I do have to say is Abby and her burrito. Like, what the fuck? This girl wolfs this puppy down. Like, she's just walking up the stairs, talking at the same time, and I counted. She wolfs this thing down in 4 bites. Slow down, girl. But we get to the room, and Manny is going to get Mel, who is also coming, and who Abby doesn't get along with because, well, she's having a baby with Owen. We get to Abby's room, and she basically lives in box seats to a stadium, and this is where the WLF have their HQ. And Manny returns with Mel, who is very, very pregnant, but somehow she has been cleared for battle. And this is the biggest eye roll for me in this whole game. Why would the WLF clear her for combat at this stage when, as we just saw in the cafeteria, there are plenty of people available that are not holding America's future inside of them? And not only does this put the mother and the baby at danger, but also Abby and Manny, who won't really be able to rely on her much. And even though they kind of mention it, they're still sort of like, this is all normal. So I don't know. I just don't buy this. It's a bit immersion breaking, especially as we get into combat scenarios later. Another thing we see here is on stadium grounds. We see that this is where they keep the WLF dogs, and these are the same dogs that Ellie has killed throughout her 3 days. And this is clearly another way to have us sympathize with Abby and her friends, as they are nice to dogs and they pet them and they play catch, but Ellie, she kills them. It's a bit obvious and a bit heavy-handed what is going on here. In some ways, this bit of trying too hard makes me a little bit less sympathetic, makes me a little bit less likely to go along with what Naughty Dog is trying to have me go along with. Now, I know this is where a lot of the fans get pretty divided. A lot of people really like Abby and her friends and have sympathized with them and don't really have a problem with all of this. For me, though, especially this early on, I am still having a hard time. Even though I can definitely understand Abby's reasoning to kill Joel, I have a hard time still connecting with her at this stage, despite all of Naughty Dog's attempts for me to gain some sympathy for her. But maybe over time that will change. And look, this is definitely a big risk for Naughty Dog, and it was a big undertaking to try to bring players on this journey in this way and to try to have us actually like this character, especially after what they did to my boy Joel. But I will try my best here. Now, we do a little target practice, which is fun, especially beating Manny, but pay attention to this. Now, we get 18 bullets for our semi-auto rifle, which, by the way, it annoys me that they call it that, because if you played Factions in the first game, this is not the semi-auto rifle, this is the variable rifle. But we get 18 bullets for our semi and we get 16 bullets for our pistol. But after that, we get into a car to go out, and Manny makes pregnant Mel sit in the back. More points on the board for him. And Abby and Mel are there having this awkward conversation. There's clearly some tension because of their connection to Owen, who, by the way, hasn't shown up for his baby mama Mel in like 2 weeks. Like, are we supposed to like this guy? These are some of the things like I wish they were doing, like have us like some of these characters, because at this point we've been trained to kind of hate them. But anyways, a lot of these characters are very tense from killing Joel and how that all went down in such a brutal way. So a number of these characters are a bit shaken. But this drama between these two, between Abby and Mel, is just not something that I can really get invested in. It's not something that I'm interested in at this moment. This is kind of small ball compared to the larger, bigger things that we've been going over so far in this game. But not 2 minutes from leaving the headquarters do we get attacked by the Scars. They wasted no time, and clearly these WLF don't have much of a wide perimeter going. So the Scars, or the Seraphites as they are officially called, are this Seattle faction, which is basically a cult, and they're always at odds with the WLF. They use whistles to communicate, and they tend to have more primitive weapons, and they are very devoted to their religion, with a tagline of "May she guide you." And they also have this very uniform look, wearing always this dull brown clothing, with all men having shaved heads and all women having this same bun hairstyle. So we have this bit of a cinematic chase where we shoot a bit at the enemies with only our semi-auto until ultimately we crash at this Home Depot type store. Now remember my bullet count. I said 18 semi-auto bullets and 16 pistol bullets. But when we arrive at the store, I now have 9 semi-auto bullets, which I don't know, maybe is accurate, but I have 4 pistol ammo, and I didn't fire that even once. It's so lame. Don't give me these bullets if you're going to take them away. away. Okay, so we fight some infected in this Home Depot, and that ends up exhausting the rest of my ammo, including these pipe bombs that I was able to craft. This is a new item, by the way, that Abby gets to craft and equip. And we get through the store, and we need to keep making our way. But now we need to get into this other building, which we do by climbing up the roof, and we let Mel in from the first floor. Now, in this other building, Alice scares the shit out of me because I forgot dogs won't hurt us anymore. But we use this crank to open the door, and it ends up breaking with only Manny and Alice, the dog, getting out. And this is a clear setup to have Abby and Mel bond more and get past some of this awkwardness. Now, I understand this would be an awkward situation to be in, but I can't help it. I'm not at all invested in this storyline. The complicated pregnancy and love triangle does parallel with Ellie, Dina, and Jesse's somewhat similar situation, but I have not been given a ton of reasons to like or care about any of these characters yet. In fact, I gotta say, Mel, Abby, and Owen are perhaps the most boring of the WLF members we encounter. It makes it even harder to invest in this drama. Manny, on the other hand, even though he can be a bit of a jerk, even though he spit on Joel and called him a puta madre, I actually like him as a character. But we find a way around, and somehow we are able to get a pregnant woman up there to the top of the roof. Mel does some serious parkour to get there. She actually does some serious parkour a couple times, and this honestly really just takes me out of it a bit. They even don't let you look back and show one of these moments because probably they didn't know how to really animate this well. But we get up and over and down to the bottom, and there's this camper van which you get into, and it indicates a lockbox combo from The Big Win. Now, I thought this referenced the big fish they caught, but that actually didn't work as a combo. It was actually these lottery numbers over here. And I liked that I had to use my brain a little bit for this. And this lockbox is definitely worth it because you get the hunting pistol, which is basically this pocket sniper, very similar to the El Diablo from the first game, and this is one of my favorite guns to use, hands down. Now, next we get through the train yard, and honestly, I tried stealthing, but there's a lot of people to sneak past. Instead, with what little I had, I went for the kills, and I got a good flow going here. I took out a few enemies, and then I ran somewhere else to keep the enemies on their toes. I poke my head out and kill, and run and reset. It does feel like this is really how you're meant to play through some of these sections, especially if you suck at stealth like me. You kind of just need to jump in and out of it, playing a little bit of cat and mouse. From here, we get this other little fight sequence in this gas station, but we are soon rescued by the WLF and taken to the base. Mel ended up getting hurt here, which, like, I just can't with her. But we get to the base, and we need to meet with the infamous Isaac, who, by the way, does get referenced a bunch as you play as Ellie in notes and things. So there has been a little bit of a buildup here that has been taking place. You do get to talk a little bit with some of the soldiers, including Vita Girl, who is still playing Hotline Miami and is not dead yet. And Abby makes a quip about video games that's a little bit fourth wally. We also get to see Nora in the morgue with a bunch of bodies, and Danny is dead. But they kind of have this slow reveal moment that makes you think that it might be Owen, especially when Nora says, "Don't tell Mel about this," but it's just Danny, some random guy. And this section actually reminds me of another very good video by Nakey Jakey talking about how Naughty Dog's game design is outdated, where he suggested that it would have been better in this moment to show some of the real bodies or some of the real people from the WLF that Ellie had actually taken out, as a way to show the consequences of those actions and create more of a connection between these 2 days. I think that would have been a good idea too. We finally meet Isaac, and you can tell this guy is kind of fucked up because as the leader of the WLF, he is actually hanging out in the torture chambers and is personally torturing the Scars. Now, he has had this plan to take the Scars out by using an incoming storm as a way to conceal their attack, and he wants Abby and Manny to lead the first wave. But Abby is more concerned with what's going on with Owen and why it seems like he maybe shot that random guy Danny in order to protect a Scar. So, against Isaac's wishes, she is going to go find him at the likely place he is, which is the aquarium. And we get a flashback that tells us exactly why it's the aquarium. 3 years earlier, as Abby and Owen have been newly taken in by the WLF now that the Fireflies have been disbanded, and Owen has Abby up on this Ferris wheel enjoying the view. Now here we get to see more of Abby's fear of heights, as she barely enjoys herself at all despite Owen's best attempts to keep things light. He ends up jumping down into the water forcing her to do the same. And they swim around and they're able to get in through this opening into the Seattle Aquarium. And this is another pretty cool area. We get to see another abandoned attraction. And this does parallel a lot with Ellie and Joel's trip to the dinosaur museum. But Abby, having lost her father and being a bit older, is more concerned with getting back to training than really enjoying herself. And this has an interesting bit of environmental storytelling here, as we see a family had moved into the aquarium, this couple with 2 kids, but after the loss of the mother, the kids got a little bit resentful that their dad really didn't do enough to save her. So they ended up getting coaxed into joining up with the Scars, something Abby doesn't understand at all. But Owen, knowing how people saw fireflies, has a better understanding that each side, each faction at least believes they're fighting for something just, and therefore aren't all bad. Something that leads us to believe that, yeah, maybe he did shoot Danny to protect a Scar. And so we move into one of these kids, Max's secret fort, that is a nice moment of beauty in the aquarium. But even with this budding romance between Abby and Owen, it's clear Abby is just consumed with getting revenge. She's even been doing a lot of training in the gym lately. And it's another parallel because Abby, just like Ellie, can't seem to let go of her thirst for revenge. And those around them, despite trying to move on with them, see that they might have to leave them behind. So we flash back to the present, and Manny is going to help us get to Owen without the WLF knowing. And here we get a little potential Easter egg where we see what looks like these Warhammer Space Marine type figures. And at this point, it's pretty interesting. Although I am less invested in these characters, I have already almost completely forgotten about the main story, Ellie and her quest for revenge, all of that. Now we're watching a completely different story unfold, and it makes sense. Abby got her revenge, and so now this is the story of the aftermath of her moving on with life, potentially being at peace again. But at the same time, it's weird to be following something so disconnected to the main story, to be experiencing what could have and probably should have been a DLC or another game. And to take us away from that story for so long, it's a risk, and not something that I think works that well for me. But we need to follow the sunset to get to Owen. Now, starting off here, you do get to do some scavenging with a few jump scares, but some cool finds. You find this really cool little Easter egg, which is literally an egg, a precursor egg from the Jack series. One of my favorite game series ever, by the way. And when you talk about Naughty Dog storytelling, I think the Jack story is very well written and compelling, and perhaps underrated for how good that narrative is. But here you also get a double barrel shotgun with a generous 3 bullets. But of course, another jump scare makes me end up using up most of that. But you also get another training manual to upgrade your supplements. And by the way, Abby has her own set of skills separate from Ellie that you can collect supplements for and upgrade along the way. Now, Abby continues to explore, and she enters into Scar territory, where she frequently comments about how crazy they are and how much she despises them. But eventually you get to a part and there are some Scars here to fight, and this part is actually kind of tough because there is this sniper up in one of the buildings who sees nearly everywhere you go, and it can be really hard to stealth through. Abby even comments how she needs to get past him in order to get through. So eventually I figured out I just need to make sure to get this guy right away as quick as I can. And even though I do briefly give myself away, I'm able to kind of run away and hide again, so then I can sneak right by as most Scars are looking past me trying to find me. This allows me to head into the building where I can try to escape, though I do sloppily run into 2 enemies that are still there, but I'm able to take them out and get through. This gives you a small bit of relief until quickly back into another section with Scars, this time with this very cool vertically designed level which has you jumping back and forth between 2 halves of a building. And while I wish I had time to stop and admire the design, I get caught really quickly, so I just run through, which will take me straight to a cutscene where I ultimately get captured by some of the Scars. I could have ended up taking out all these motherfuckers, but they still would have caught me. But this leads to another flashback. Basically 3 in one day. And yes, we are still on day 1. So this flashback actually takes place shortly before Abby and her friends are about to take off to Jackson to kill Joel. It's Christmas time and she is visiting Owen in the aquarium, which is basically like his man cave now. And he's actually been painting a new mural of the Salt Lake City Zoo where we are able to see the zebras and the giraffes together, perhaps representing a bit of a bridge between both games, or perhaps the protectors of the zebra and the giraffe petters should all be friends. Now, an interesting thing that Owen does mention here is the rumors of fireflies regrouping in Santa Barbara. This detail will be very important later. But now it's time to kick some ass with this bow and arrow game, where you have to shoot the targets and try to beat Mel's score so you can really look badass in front of Owen. And I didn't beat the score the first time, so I tried it again. Second time, I ended up tying the score, which is enough to give you the trophy, but I want to clobber Mel. I want to show her who is boss, so I do it again, and this time I get the 11 and beat her ass. Now, the real reason Abby came here was to tell Owen that they found Joel's brother Tommy, who was a former Firefly in a town called Jackson, and now they had this lead to Joel. Owen, you can tell, is not really interested in this revenge, but as a friend is still trying to support Abby. In some ways, this obsession has to be why they didn't end up working out, and why Owen ends up getting with Mel instead. You know, I think another reason why I might be having a hard time connecting to this drama and this love triangle is because I already know Mel and Owen are dead. It takes a lot of the stakes out of these moments because Ellie will be coming for them soon. But so this flashback ends, and yeah, now Abby is being tortured by scars. And to be honest, this part is very graphic, and I'm afraid of YouTube demonetizing me, so we will tread with caution here. Soon, very luckily, the characters Yar and Lev, who are these two escaped scars, are nearby for some reason at the right possible time, and they happen to distract the scars. One of them ends up severely damaging Yar's arm, but Lev is able to save the day, and they decide to save Abby too, even though they don't know her because she kind of helped them with the struggle. Now, what comes next is the absolute hardest, longest, and scariest part of the game so far. First things first, you have to fight these stalkers in the dead of night with nothing but a hammer. Now, Lev will help a little bit with his bow and arrow, but these stalkers will double team you, so even if you do get a good flow of dodging and meleeing these guys, a second one will totally come up and disrupt that. So basically, I just try to run around and pick them off one at a time if I can. But of course, this just works horribly, and it takes me so many tries. But we aren't even close to done, because when you do get through this, you now have to run through the forest a bit with these scary stalkers making noise until you get to a car where now you have to fight even more of these guys. And well, what I didn't notice here until it was too late was there are a bunch of bricks and bottles which you can use to your advantage, and I also at this time had unlocked Abby's momentum ability, which allows you, if you're able to strike kill an enemy, to quick one punch melee another enemy in a short period of time. Of course though, I didn't utilize this, so instead I just climbed on top of the car and kept jumping off and climbing back up, putting some melee in while I can. It still ultimately worked, but it made me very low on health. Of course though, this is not all, because now you need to fight this bulky scar with a big pickaxe and make sure to dodge and punch correctly. For this, you actually need to learn to dodge her swings before striking. And as you continue to damage her, she ends up swinging one time, then two times, then three times before you can actually strike. So once I finally deal with her, I can finally gather my things as she was wearing my backpack, and so now I'm stocked up. And you do get a little break here, but if you thought that was hard, just wait. Now you get locked in this claustrophobic room with very little supplies and no real escape. You need to survive for a long period of time until Lev is able to open the door. And this is really hard because they can kind of come at you from all angles, but ultimately I kind of find a place where I can sort of bottleneck them. And when I thought I got the hang of things, dealing with the runners and the stalkers, they ended up dropping 2 shamblers on my ass, which of course hurt me with their spore clouds, and they take a lot more shots, which I didn't really have. But after several attempts, I finally perfected this flawless run, utilizing exactly every single thing I had on me. And I'm even able to take out those 2 shamblers, but for good measure, they end up dropping 2 more runners on me that I wasn't prepared for. So I died. Finally though, here is what I was able to do in order to get through. Now that we finally get out, we take Yara to a trailer, and carrying her is a bit reminiscent of Joel holding both Sarah and Ellie in part 1. Perhaps an indication that in some ways Abby is finding her new family. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because Abby lays them to rest in the trailer and needs to continue on, still, to the aquarium. That's right, the night from hell isn't over yet. Walking back, you get a small bit of ammo, and then yet another supply yard filled with infected. But fuck that, I'm just gonna run straight through. Run away, and you jump this little gap, which doesn't work out, so you end up swimming to this boat where you get to pick up crossbow bolts from a guy's head that was killed in his sleep. And there's actually some interesting environmental storytelling here. There was this mutiny that took place, and we get to see how some of that unfolded. But more importantly, grabbing these crossbow bolts means that we're going to be getting a crossbow soon. And sure enough, as we get a little further into the yacht, we get the crossbow, but we now have a boat full of infected to deal with. And day one just will not end. Now, luckily, although we are not done fighting, this section is much easier than the others. Thanks in part to the crossbow, which you can use to stealth kill enemies from afar, although there isn't drop off like you get with the bow and arrow, so I do fuck that up a little bit. Otherwise, you do get another safe here, and ultimately you get through the boat and into the aquarium to look for Owen. Upon arrival, he is nowhere to be found though, until you get outside to the boat. This infamous boat. We learn inside that Owen is planning to abandon his child and mother of his children in order to escape to Santa Barbara, where, as mentioned earlier, they have heard rumors of a Firefly reunion. And we learn Owen did kill Danny, mostly because they got in a tussle over killing this old man Scar, who had gotten tired of the fight. Pretty random, actually, but Owen, I guess, is tired of the violence, especially after what happened to Joel. And he's looking to find some light again. He's looking for hope in all this pointlessness. It's something that definitely has been missing in this story, something that was deeply embedded in part 1 that is noticeably absent from part 2. Joel's fault, really. From here, though, things get a little bit steamy, but let's just say Abby and Owen reconnect, so YouTube doesn't get me demonetized. And after all that, as they sleep, Abby has a dream about the 2 kids from that night, and damn, she now feels a need to save them. So day 2 begins, and Abby can hear the Scars searching for the kids. We end up backtracking though where we ran from the infected just yesterday. And well, I wanted to see what would happen if I fell back into the water, but that dried up, so that didn't work. So now there are actually Scars here, and I'm not about to make it through with stealth. So instead, I just load up on supplies to take them out. Luckily, so far, not counting last night, at least through Abby's section in Grounded, we tend to have supplies to deal with these people. And as fighting is my best means to get through, that's what I will do. We get to Lev and Yara is really not well. So we have to bring her back to the aquarium, where Mel has now arrived just in time to have missed Abby slinking out that morning. And Mel, being a surgeon, can help Yara, but she needs supplies. But also, these are Scars. Why should they help them? Regardless, Abby is vouching for them, and so Abby and Lev will make a journey using the Seraphites' secret sky bridge to get supplies from the WLF hospital. The same hospital, by the way, that Ellie will visit on this exact same day. On their way out, Owen wants to speak to Abby, and Mel gives him that look. May you never have to receive this look, because this look means he's going to be in deep shit later. So we need to get to a building to get to this sky bridge, and this is an amazingly beautiful part of the game. The verticality as you make your way up, coupled with these rolling rivers, is awesome, and traversing is very fun. Even though it's a little bit harder to connect with these characters, the gameplay of Abby's section is quite good. We get to this one apartment where we see more of these Warhammer type figures. At least I think that's what these are. I don't know. I'm not that big of a nerd, so who knows. Here though, we get a note giving a clue to a safe combo using the apartment numbers, which I know are either 301 or 302. And rather than actually looking, I just used the sound for the clues to help me get the rest. Going further, and we get to this apartment, which is full of infected, but you're on a ledge. And to be honest, I don't know how we're really supposed to stealth this part, or if that's even possible, given you really have to break a window in order to get further. So we ultimately end up fighting them, including a shambler from the ledge, which is quite dicey, but we are able to do it and we continue on. At this point, I'm doing pretty well on crafting supplies. I'm even maxing out on some of them, and so my strategy for conserving this is usually I just wait until I get to a hard section before committing to crafting something. But when you're maxed out and you see another item that's probably worth taking, I'll just craft something just so I can have that extra material. Now, even though I am low in health, sometimes you can also find these candy bars lying around, which will give you a little boost, so I don't always commit to a health kit either, even if I need it. Okay, so I keep heading up, and a funny little section is here where Lev is hopping around ledges, not afraid at all of the heights, and Abby clearly is not going to try any of that, so she just keeps finding ways around. We climb up to this upper section, and this is where we run into our first bit of scars or seraphites as Lev continues to correct us, despite being an ex-seraphite at this point. Now, these are just a few scars, so they aren't so bad, and so we get through that. At this point, though, we also begin to get dropped a few hints here about what's going on with Lev through what the scars are saying. Now, Lev is trans, and as religious as the seraphites are, you can begin to know why they might have a problem and shun him. Now, the thing is, only really if you are paying close attention to the details do you even pick up on this. And Lev is one of the best new additions to this game. And actually, playing from Abby's perspective is way more enjoyable with him there, because certainly Abby is very boring along with Mel and Owen. Moving on, we do get another fighting section where we're taking on scars on the skyscraper rafters, and this is another cool verticality section. And well, I'm able to mostly get by with stealth here, taking one out, climbing up, semi-alerting them, but not really enough. And well, I did die a few times at this point, but the game did checkpoint me, so I actually found a way to completely stealth through. And we do get through, and we now have to move to the sky bridge, which is fucking scary and immersive and windy. And you do get a sense here that the Abby-Lev dynamics are very much meant to mirror that of Joel and Ellie. Lev in particular has been living quite a sheltered life under the scars rule. He doesn't really understand technology or even language like the word cool. And so here, Abby is kind of more like a big sister type figure, although Yara literally is a big sister to Lev. But still, she gets to kind of show Lev some of the ropes and teach him about things that he wouldn't have otherwise learned under the Seraphites. And more importantly, Lev just kind of represents that pure innocence similar to that of Ellie in the first game, although Lev is way more used to killing people. Now, the sky bridge is scary and again immersive, such that you even have to balance your controller, and I definitely didn't realize that at first, so I fell. But you do get to a point, which is very luckily over the top of a skyscraper roof, which happens to also have a pool underneath, because at this point you do succumb to your own fears and fall, and by pure luck you fall right into that pool. Honestly, this is too lucky. I mean, this is a game where so much of it is trying to be realistic. For something pure chance and lucky like this to occur, it does kind of take me out of it a bit. But we do land in the pool, and this is this new route now that is going to be very scary, of course. So now that we need to go through this building, we come across this safe, and this one was perhaps actually the hardest because there are three major areas to look in: the bathroom, a juice shop, and a gym. And for some reason, I passed by this note in the juice shop. The triangle prompt wasn't really obvious enough here, but I eventually found it, and it says you need the Wi-Fi code for the lockbox. Now, for the Wi-Fi code, you'll need to look around on the walls, and you do finally see it in the gym. From here, things get scary as fuck, as you have to traverse downwards through this old building full of infected. Honestly, though, my memory of this place was that it was much harder and much longer. Perhaps, though, I'm just getting better at the game. Or maybe it's just I kind of knew what to expect. Regardless, this is still pretty tough, and it is one of the very hard sections. So one of the first things you need to do is you need to get a gas mask for Lev, and so you have to slink through these rooms. And to be honest, I can just tell we're going to be fighting here, so I'm treading very carefully. Sure enough, as soon as I get the gas mask, the infected come out, so I just hightail it out of there. Another thing that happens a lot here are these jump scares. Infected have been stuck to the wall, and when you get close enough, they pop out and try to get you. This is a bad recipe for wasting stuff, and something that will haunt me later. But something else you do get here is a flamethrower, which is very cool, but also not quick enough for this jump scare. Now, as I traverse, there are some small sections with infected, including this one with a shambler, which I totally could have skipped because I got nothing important for fighting this guy. Also, there was this dumb glitch that happened where I found a bottle material, but I was maxed out, so I crafted something in order to be able to pick it up, but then it wouldn't let me actually grab the material. Either way, I guess I needed those pipe bombs for the next section, because the next section is a room full of clickers and a huge ass bloater that you need to get through in order to open and escape. And I started this one off so perfectly. I used my crossbow to one-shot the clickers in the head and even sneakily gathered the bolts from their bodies. Of course, what I forgot about was what Naughty Dog had been warning me about the whole time: the stalkers attached to the walls. So I got a little close to one of these and I got the jump scare, which alerted the whole freaking room to my presence. So now I had to use all my pipe bombs on the bloater and everything else on the clickers until I had nothing left at all and basically just had to rely on Lev to get the last clicker. I guess that's one way to do it, and unfortunately there wasn't a ton of supplies to gather from the now empty room. Except for, one last jump scare for good measure. But after this, we are able to get through the building and we're able to approach the WLF hospital, where we leave Lev behind since he is still considered an enemy. And I totally forgot we are actually a wolf, so we have no reason to actually stealth here. So we're able to waltz right in and we're brought to the entrance, which is also the major combat area that you have fought as Ellie on this very same day. But this must actually be earlier in that day, as we hear Nora is on her way back. She's not there yet. And of course, we all know what happens to her. What's funny though is at this point you are following a totally different story, and I have basically forgotten all about what's going on with Ellie. Now, sure, this might be the point, right? Like, we're trying to empathize with Abby and come around to her perspective, but to be honest, this is also just weird from the perspective of trying to tell one story. Like, we have deviated so far away from it on what feels like a side quest. From a storytelling perspective, this is veering a little bit too far off from where the focus area should be. And even with the main story they have been trying to tell so far with Ellie, it does still feel far off from where the main focus should be. The flashbacks actually seem to offer the most impact to the story, showing how the characters reacted to Joel's decisions, while the 3 main days for Ellie revolve around this quest for revenge. We don't even know yet what the main crux of Abby's storyline is in these 3 days, as it's kind of at this point still meandering around, and possibly is just more concerned with us trying to get to know who she is. Now, although Abby is initially greeted warmly, including again by Vita Girl on her last day with us, rest in peace, Isaac has actually alerted some WLF to capture her because she has basically gone AWOL, being gone for this long. So they hold her up in cuffs until Nora arrives, and conveniently no one is around, so she lets her escape. This also kind of begs the question for me: how bad really is Isaac? They have talked him up so much as this badass leader. They've even shown him getting involved in some brutal torture tactics. But like, Nora isn't afraid of the consequences of releasing Abby, and Abby wasn't too concerned with any of that either. That is the weird part of Isaac, I will say, is I feel like even he is kind of lame. Anyways, Nora tells Abby that the medical supplies she is likely looking for is down in the depths of the hospital, where the WLF haven't searched yet. And Naughty Dog actually calls this Ground Zero. To me, this implies potentially that this is the origins of the infection, although according to the TV show, that happened in Indonesia. Perhaps, though, this is Ground Zero for the USA, or even Ground Zero for Seattle. But either way, this does imply that some of the longest iterations of infected may reside here. And of course, I know we will be running into one of these scary motherfuckers, so I tread carefully. You will notice as you're going through, there's this big red door, which you will eventually need to get through, and there's this other door locked by the power, And yeah, that's where this bad boy has been chilling. But in order to proceed further, we need to turn the power on. And at first, you are generally okay. There is a jump scare on the wall, but it's only after you turn on the power to the doors that a lot of infected are able to roam around. And now I am able to take them out, but I also am trying to scavenge all I can, and especially trying to keep hold to my stronger ammo like my bombs and my double barrel. With the power being on, this actually released this big boy, which you can see as there is a hole blown through the whole area. And now we keep looking for the medical supplies, and finally we get to this ambulance car where we actually find it. But of course, just as we think we are safe, we run into him, the Rat King. And now we have the biggest and scariest battle in all of the game. And I was completely stupid here. I had intended to craft some bullets and some supplies that I had on me before running into the Rat King, but I forgot. So now I will have to do this during the boss battle itself. Now, as you're fighting the Rat King, you can dodge him a little bit, especially using these poles. And you can use these poles to kind of try to stay close, but have something to kind of dodge around to stay away from him. So I do this a little bit and I unload all that I have on him. I even take a quick moment that I have to craft my bullets for him, but honestly, that still isn't enough. So now I am just left running around the entire area, spamming triangle along the edges to pick up whatever type of bullets or whatever they have. And honestly, it's not much. I do die, but given I did damage him enough, I ended up getting checkpointed, which was nice, but still, I was checkpointed with no supplies. Eventually, I do find some stuff, and this was enough to help split the Rat King into a stalker and the rest of him, which is scary as fuck. Keep running around, and I am able to get a few bullets and some flamethrower though, and so I am able to quickly and luckily finish off the big boy. And at this point, it's just the stalker who remains, but he has run off. And suddenly, this room is just full of ammo. And I don't know if this stuff was here the whole time or it just popped up. I'm thinking it more likely popped up at the end because I will need it for the next fight. So I scavenge everything in this area and then I head to the next one to fight the stalker. And this is a beefier stalker than the ones you typically deal with. And my strategy for him is simple. Just don't let him hide. So I chase his ass the whole time, even as he's running away from me, and I fire everything I'm able to gather at him until I exhaust of all the stuff, and he ends up grabbing me. Luckily though, I had unlocked the ability to shiv in the skills menu, and I did happen to have one crafted, so that was enough to finish him off. So it was very scary, but all things considered, I was kind of proud of how I'd done because this was definitely one of those moments I was very scared of. So after that, Abby and Lev reunite and they bring the medical supplies back to the aquarium where Mel is able to successfully amputate Yara's arm. Abby and Owen have this brief moment where Abby says, "What happened to us?" And Owen says, "Maybe we stopped looking for the light." I think this is actually important for the theme of this game. No one really has any hope to cling to. It's devoid of it, and I think it's one of the reasons it's hard to enjoy this game. As Joel says though in part 1, no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for, and it's only now that Abby is beginning to find that in Yara and Lev. Before, it was just let's kill Joel, but now she is sort of invested into these kids and invested in helping them out. And even as she rests a bit and she dreams, this seems true as we see her walking towards the hospital room again, but rather than seeing the devastation and rather than seeing Yara and Lev dead, she sees her dad happy, probably proud of her actions now. And this dream is not so much a nightmare, it's actually a good dream. And it kind of shows that Abby is finding some peace and moving on. And this brings us to day 3, where we wake up and we see Yara and Lev fighting. But also Mel is there, who even after they had mended a lot of that awkwardness in day 1, is starting to give Abby the cold shoulder again. She doesn't think Abby has good intentions with these kids, and it's all about Owen, and I'm sure she suspects about them doing the dirty deed in that boat. So she basically says that she's going to go to Santa Barbara with Owen, but Abby can't come because she is a bad person. And I'm just wondering, like, who's going to help help them deliver the baby then. But also, it's just hard to even invest in these relationships, even if I did like these characters, because I already know they're dead. I feel like at least perhaps in the storytelling here, they should have swapped back and forth between Ellie and Abby during these days rather than take this approach, as we are following this entire storyline that we already basically know a lot of the answer to. Now, Lev has actually gone missing, and so you help Yara find him, and they do discuss how hard it was for Lev to identify as a man in the very strict and religious upbringing of the Seraphites, where Lev was destined to become a wife to an elder rather than become what he truly wanted, which was a warrior. And they also talk about how Lev wants to save his mother despite the fact that she is super devoted to the Seraphites and basically will never accept him for who he is. So we play fetch with the dogs and we find a shark toy for Lev in hopes of cheering him up. We run into Owen, who thinks he can still have Abby come to Santa Barbara and they can all live happily ever after as some sort of a dysfunctional family. And it's a moment of hope, sort of, except we still know what ends up going down. But there's no time to linger because Lev has taken a boat to try to retrieve his mother. Abby and Yara go to try to get him while Owen can fix up the boat for their journey. And we do some light scavenging on the way, but soon we start hearing gunfire. So Abby tells Yara to wait back while she checks it out. And this is where we actually run into Manny, who is dealing with this really good sniper. And I really love this section. It's almost like the sniper section in The Last of Us Part 2, but it is a bit more scripted here, as you kind of have to follow this one path carefully through the streets in order to avoid getting shot. Eventually you get to this parking structure and the sniper lures infected to you with gunfire. You keep traversing further through the building and you have to actually flank the guy until you eventually have him cornered. But as you try to get through one door, Manny gets very unceremoniously taken out, similar to what happened with Jesse. And so now Abby is just on her own. But what I really love about this is just like the sniper section in part 1, where you get to a door and the sniper starts attacking you, so too does that happen here. And at first, it does look like a random guy, but then you realize this sniper is Tommy. Now, I absolutely love this moment because this whole time you are annoyed and angry at the sniper, and you can't wait to finish him off, expecting him to be just some random enemy, just like the part 1 sniper. But then you find out it's Tommy, who you, as the player, actually care about, but yet we're seeing him portrayed as like random enemy number 15. And this is just one of the best ways, I think, to drive home this point, that even your enemies are people with stories and loved ones and good and bad inside them. That tribalism paints these people as other, but when you go a level deeper, they are much more than that. They have a whole backstory and a whole group of people that they love and care about. It's a very powerful moment and a reminder that this whole story you are driving towards right now with Abby is about to get derailed by this revenge plot for the death of Joel. Now, Yara does help you here, by the way. Of course, it's the old trope of Abby saying, you stay here, but then she ends up secretly following you. So Tommy is hurt by this, but he ends up falling into the water. And of course, for now, we know that he makes it. And Yara and Abby now have to make their way to the Seraphite Island, basically that faction's home base, to get Lev and take him back. At the island, you find a safe entry point and you need to find Lev at your home. Now, something that does bother me a bit with these Last of Us games is it is trying to tell a cinematic story, but I'm also trying to scavenge the area for supplies. And sometimes these two contradict each other as conversations are taking place, but I am running around needing to search. And it can disrupt some of the cinematic flow. It's not a huge deal, but it is something that sometimes I notice. Now, at some point, Yara asks why Abby was helping them, and to be honest, I'm actually wondering the same thing.
I guess you don't deserve this, but also I needed to.
But her answer is really not a good explanation. I think the real reason, though, is her father was a good guy, someone who wants to help those in need, and so it's just what he would have done. Like when he tried to save the zebra, and like when he tried to make the cure. And so although Abby had been on a much different path of revenge for so long when she was looking for Joel, she can now start to right her ship and begin looking towards the light. Now, there are some combat sections to get through as you journey through Scar territory, and there are a decent number of enemies to get through, but generally you do have just enough supplies to take them out, and you end up picking up enough supplies along the way in these combat sections to get any stragglers. At this point, I don't really care to conserve much ammo because I know the game is reliably stocking me back up for the next fight, and it has been working that way. In the beginning of the game, it felt a lot harder to get anything, but now it seems like they're stocking you up at a decent clip, and that's enough for me to get through these sections. So eventually we do get to Lev, where we find that he killed his mom, basically in self-defense, as she was attacking him, not understanding what Lev has been going through, and basically disowning her own son. Yara doesn't seem too torn up about her mother's death though, but this still was their mother. Perhaps though they have seen how this cult has really taken over and changed people, and their mother was really long gone deep in this cult for a long time. Now we make our way further to the city called Haven, which I really hope is a small nod to Haven City from the Jack series, but also this island is under attack by the WLF. Remember, Isaac had wanted Manny and Abby to lead the first wave during the storm, and this is that moment. Although Manny is dead and Abby has abandoned her duty. Now we do get to this one section where a wolf attacks Yara nearly to death, and a number of wolves descend on Abby and Lev. But although they do recognize Abby, they keep their guns pointed and speak of the devil, here is Isaac. He seems quite forgiving, allowing Abby to go back to discuss this later. And maybe that won't be true, maybe he will torture her, but he at least seems forgiving. But Abby wants to protect Lev from getting killed, something that Isaac is trying to do. And so as he is about to pull the trigger, Yara actually makes this last-ditch kill of Isaac before she is ultimately taken out. Isaac is played by Jeffrey Wright, and honestly, this part is just too small. He had like 2 scenes and he was hyped up for so much of the game, and he's just out. Perhaps he was a little bit expensive. So the WLF light Yara up, and Lev and Abby have to escape now. Lev being like, your people did this, and Abby in this powerful moment declares, you are my people. It's a signifier that The Last of Us really are the bonds between the few survivors that exist in this post-apocalyptic world. Joel and Ellie and their bond is a version of The Last of Us, and so too now is Abby and Lev. And so now the WLF are after them, and Abby is still pretty quick to start taking them out, despite probably actually knowing some of these people. Although, to be fair, they are very pissed off and they're ready to kill her, so what choice does she really have? We fight through this brewery, and ultimately I find my way to my favorite cheese spot on top of the bar, where I can melee anyone who dares enter. Get through this section and continue towards Haven, as the fighting between the two factions intensifies. And when previously you were the main enemy, now you are sort of a bystander, as you and Lev no longer are really attached to either faction. As you come across all this fighting, you do need to get past though. And this is kind of interesting because previously we have had these sections where there are infected and one faction and they have to interact, but never before have we had 2 human factions needing to interact in this way. And I do think it would have been cool to try to sneak by and have it unfold around you, but at some level, at least on Grounded, it seems the easiest way is to get yourself involved somehow. And this can be pretty funny because whichever faction notices you will start to target you for a bit, but then they'll get distracted by the other faction, and it's actually a bit goofy to watch as the enemy AI just kind of keeps switching back and forth and sometimes running back and forth frantically. But I am able to get through this first section, and then I jump on a horse to ride further into town. And as you do so, both factions are fighting each other, but also they're trying to go for you too. And it's funny how some of these WLF hate you so much now. I mean, I guess you did kill their leader, but I don't even know how they even all know that by this point. You do fall off the horse eventually though, and you need to go on foot, where you have yet another faction versus faction section. And it seems pretty cinematic as the fighting continues up the street, but I do find myself having to get involved because these guys have really horrible aim and I can't be here all day.
Get them!
So we get through and we escape through the burning building, only to now have to encounter the last big bad Seraphite, which just takes a lot of dodges and melee strikes. It's really not that bad. From here though, we escape the burning town, we get to our boat, and we make it back to the aquarium. Now, it's at this point that we are finally reminded and are confronted with the fact that Ellie and her friends have come to town when you discover Alice, Mel, and Owen dead. Only previously in that day had you really known anything about this when you encountered Tommy, because your journey on these 3 days have been about so much different things. But now, finally, these stories have been stitched back together as Lev has now found a map with a big circle on it saying where Ellie and her crew is. Don't even get me started on how dumb and convenient that is. But now they do know their exact location, and Abby is now back on a revenge kick. Now, she doesn't know about all of her friends being dead at this point, but Owen was her biggest love, and so you do have to imagine she will want revenge to at least similar levels to the revenge she got against Joel for killing her father. And this is leading to the part I have been dreading the most to get through Ungrounded, but we will get there. So when Abby arrives at the theater, what unfolds is basically what we saw at the end of Ellie's 3 days in Seattle, but this time from Abby's perspective. We see how Abby gets in and we see her killing Jesse and what looks like killing Tommy. And Ellie is able to run away for a little bit, and as Abby, you chase her down. Now at this point, I feel like the developers are expecting you to perhaps side more with Abby here, or at least enough to be willing to play as her and fight Ellie. They have been working this whole time to deconstruct and reconstruct everything, having Ellie brutally killing Abby's friends and dogs. Meanwhile, Abby is saving kids and being selfless and losing all of her friends. And I wonder what most people feel at this point, because while I can empathize with Abby, I am still very much Team Ellie. And what would have been cool here is if they just let you choose. Having seen both perspectives now, it would be interesting to then let the player choose how they want to play, even if the fight ends up ending the exact same way. But instead, we must play as Abby. And it's just weird because unlike the death of Joel, which strongly aligned us with Ellie, I do not feel strongly aligned with Abby, but I suspect that Naughty Dog thinks that they have gotten me to this place. Either way though, I need to hunt Ellie down. And at this point, the only reason I'm doing this is to advance the story. After trying to immerse me in this character's experience, I'm doing what Naughty Dog wants rather than what I want, which is not to hurt Ellie. Regardless, this is the section I've been dreading, not necessarily because it's against Ellie, but because it's scary and hard. You have to sneak through the backstage of the theater and get a jump on Ellie, who all of a sudden can do like this sprint crouch walking that she couldn't do in her first 3 days, and you end up feeling much slower, and it's really hard to get the jump on her or even find where she is, especially without having listen mode, so I die a lot here. Although one thing I will say is that on Grounded, it still can be a little bit forgiving in that once you get one strike on her, it does checkpoint you, so you don't have to start the entire battle over again. You basically have to get 3 strikes on Ellie as she slinks around the map, laying down trap mines and coming at you with either a shotgun or a bow. And Ellie is also really good at dodging things like bricks or bottles. You really have to get the jump on her in order to make any of these strikes work. And of course, as you do strike her, you have to press the square a bunch, and it's forcing you to do things like trying to strangle Ellie, which is weird since I don't want to do any of that, but of course, I want to get through the story. Eventually, though, you get Ellie enough, and Dina comes to help, and totally forgot she was here because they basically have had you forget about her, but she does come and help. And Abby actually nearly kills both of them, and only doesn't because Lev reminds her that he is there. Somehow that is enough to convince her to let them both live. Honestly, it's kind of hard to buy. I mean, the whole point of going there was to kill them, basically like she did to Joel. The logic here is that her days spent here with Lev and Yara have somehow made her let go of her vengeful nature and wanted to set the right example. But yet they both have gone around killing WLF and Scars like it's nothing. And that's not to mention Jesse and Tommy, who were just brutally shot. It's that pesky ludonarrative dissonance that Naughty Dog really likes to touch on and address with their games. This ability somehow to separate the violence of the gameplay from the story and the characters. It's a tough one here, as when Abby chooses to let them live, we have to believe that that is where her character has developed to, despite some of the contradictory choices that she has recently made. And this exact contradictory choice is going to happen again later. And before I get to the next section, I almost forgot there was something I wanted to talk about with Ellie. So one of the really cool things that could have happened here is when Ellie is collecting things on her day 3, right before she's about to kill Owen and Mel, is it would have been cool if those were the very things she used in this fight against Abby. And by you having stocked up more of the supplies, you would have actually had a stronger Ellie to face off against in the boss battle. I guess potentially if you knew this though, you could potentially cheese it by not collecting anything, and then Ellie would have basically nothing for this fight. But I think that would have been a really cool way to kind of connect your actions to this fight. Okay, but so Ellie and Dina were spared here, and we actually get to find sometime later that they are living together peacefully in a farmhouse, raising the baby of Jesse and Dina. Ellie wakes up in her house and she looks at Joel's broken watch, the same watch from the very beginning of the first game, and it feels like this is the end of part 2. It feels very much like a happily ever after. But of course, this is The Last of Us, so we know that that won't be happening. Now, Ellie has been living outside of Jackson with Dina and baby Jay, and they seem to be enjoying this quiet life quite a bit, despite Jesse's parents actually wanting them to move back to town. Ellie goes out to get JJ's toys, and this is just an epically beautiful landscape. I've been to this part of America, and yes, they have something special here. Now, it's time to gather your sheep into the pens, and this is where we start to get a hint of things not being quite right. Ellie has a hauntingly traumatic moment when just a simple farm tool falls, because it reminds her of that fateful day with Joel. She's going through some sort of post-traumatic stress, and it's causing her to have nightmares, similar to some of the nightmares Abby had been experiencing in her 3 days. Ellie has not been able to find peace still with Joel's death, possibly because she wasn't able to take out his killer or find that closure. Abby, on the other hand, was able to get rid of her nightmares, but they were still continuing even after killing Joel. It was only after she ended up saving Lev and Yara, basically finding something to fight for, that those nightmares went away. Ellie, of course, doesn't know that that might be the answer. And especially as she does seemingly have something to fight for in baby JJ, it doesn't seem to be working. So the next day comes and we hunt down a rabbit, but we also have a visitor at the house as well. And it's Tommy, who actually didn't die after all in Seattle. Although you can tell he has permanent scars around his face and he can't really walk that well. And Tommy has come to tell Ellie that he has heard about Abby's whereabouts and wants her to go seek revenge. Now this is quite different from the Tommy we saw near the beginning of the game, who was trying to stop Ellie from getting revenge, and even went himself as a means to stop her. And it even seems different from the Tommy that we saw right before Abby shot him, who was kind of satisfied with the amount of revenge he'd gotten and was ready to pack it up and go home, even without getting Abby. So perhaps his desire to have Ellie go is maybe even a bit of selfishness in trying to have her seek revenge for the wounds that he has sustained, and possibly also what ultimately resulted in the ruination of his marriage to Maria. They are not on good terms anymore. And Tommy gets kind of ugly in this section, and Dina has to walk him out because it's really getting to Ellie. And to be honest, this really gets to Ellie a lot, because later that night she can't sleep, and as she rummages through her old notebook and plays a little guitar, we end up getting a flashback to the night of the dance, and we finally see what happened on that night. Now here we're going to talk a little bit about pacing, because so much has happened since the characters had even been discussing that night. You can almost forget all the context and importance. And it does kind of feel weird to place all of that right here, because it is just so distant from the events, and it doesn't add a ton that we were super mysterious about. A lot of it you can kind of infer from the conversations. So I'm not entirely sure why they wanted to play it out here. And well, we have seen like 90% of this in one of the gameplay trailers for the marketing of this game. So showing this late, something that most of us had already seen most of already, this feels a little weird. But I guess we did need to be reminded somehow of what had been going on in Ellie's world, because we had just spent so much time in Abby's. But this just doesn't really flow very well this way as a story. And considering the game already fell over, it just feels like we are drawing this on. And one thing that's crazy is that 2 of the lost levels that we get to play in The Last of Us Remastered are from this section, one of which is hunting a boar, which kind of represents Joel, and the other is even more time spent on this dance night. So initially this section was supposed to be even longer. Anyways, though, we do get to see in this moment Joel having defended Ellie from Seth being drunk and saying nasty things to Ellie and Dina. But Ellie tells Joel to basically leave her alone. And I wondered a bit why this moment was so important for us to see. I mean, it does establish a beginning to Ellie and Dina, of course, but then I kind of remembered as the player in this moment, this is supposedly what we think Ellie's last moment with Joel was before he died. Basically saying, leave me alone. Sure, he might have been able to see her right there at the end, but she might not know how much he was even able to comprehend in the state that he was in. So it's a bit sad to think that maybe their last moment was her saying to leave me alone, but more on this a bit later. So we flash back to the present on the night that Ellie can't sleep, and she's actually packing and planning to go on this revenge quest that Tommy tipped her off to. I imagine that in her head, that's the only way to get rid of the nightmares and the trauma that she's been going through, is to go out and to finally get that revenge. Dina, who's about to stop her on her way out, basically says in a matter of words, if you go, we're over. But Ellie, still on that hunt for revenge, goes. And as the player, it's another one of those moments where it's like, just give it up. But here we are again to go to Santa Barbara. Now with Ellie on her way, we are then taken to Abby and Lev in Santa Barbara for a brief section. Now I love how beautifully they capture the California look of this city. And here's another cool detail. Abby has a double barrel like she did in the days that we played as her, but she also now has a revolver. She didn't have one in the campaign, and she can even craft bullets for this revolver. And I think this is kind of a nice touch. It's showing that she has had adventures along the way, things that we didn't really get to experience or know about, but similar to when we played as her, she has collected new guns and new abilities throughout her journey. Part of this is also probably because we had to abandon her first backpack in Haven City, but I just like that she ended up restarting her arsenal, and there's a little bit of a story going on here as to some of the things that she ended up collecting. Now we do have a little bit of scavenging here for ammo, but other than this really small encounter with Infected, this is a bit of a red herring because there's not much more to play as her. We search a house that we were tipped off about where potentially fireflies are, but it seems pretty empty. Although Lev ends up finding the bookcase that is movable, and they move it and it leads to this secret staircase down to the basement. And this is where we find some radio equipment and a list of locations. Abby desperately tries each one of them and finally succeeds with one at the Catalina Island. Now, one interesting thing is the guy that she is able to connect with is actually aware of Jerry Anderson, or at least seems to be. Perhaps this is intriguing to him because they maybe have found a way to look for a cure again. But it could also be a trap or some renewed Firefly faction that doesn't truly represent what the old one did. Either way, this is one of the most important moments of this whole game because so far we have been given basically no hope. The aftermath of the world post Joel's choice was pretty grim and pretty pointless feeling. And while you can find some happiness and peace in the world, like Dina and Ellie did, because this world still has nothing to cling to, inevitably, this happiness and peace will deteriorate and fall. So to have some inkling now that the Fireflies are back and potentially have found some new ray of hope, some new light to look for, we now can have some of that hope restored. But it can never be that easy in The Last of Us because as Abby and Lev are just about to leave, they get ambushed by the Rattlers, a pretty dark faction who does some nasty things to their prisoners. But before we know what happens, we turn back to Ellie, who has discovered Abby and Lev and formerly Owen, and formerly before that, Max and his family's boat, the infamous boat where the stuff happened. And so she's found that boat, and so she's close to finding her. And what's funny is I feel like this is how the game should have been paced. The story is going back and forth between the two characters. It started out this way in the Jackson section, but these 3 days in Seattle's were separated such that it really feels disconnected and really hard to follow as one cohesive story. And even though I like the pacing here, it does feel a little bit late as this is already feeling like a very, very expanded epilogue. But either way, going back and forth between Abby and Ellie's storylines would have helped us digest the overall story better, and especially the Abby section, which feels very disconnected until the very end. Kind of understand why they kind of had to do this from a gameplay perspective, because you have these weapon progressions for each character, and it would be kind of hard for a player to track all that and feel that progression that you kind of of need to in a video game. And of course, the gameplay is a huge highlight of this game. So while it felt long, it also is nice to have a lot of interesting and well-designed moments of gameplay. At the same time, I could see the whole Abby section being a DLC instead, and I bet that would have gone over much better. Anyways, back to Ellie in Santa Barbara. And so we have Ellie making her way towards the house on Constance, the clue that she received from Abby's boat. We fight some infected first, but after that we get funneled into a trap, typically used to trap infected, which the rattlers will actually leash up and use as defense. This moment is blurry and she actually thinks she's seeing Abby and Lev walking to her, but it's actually the two rattlers that captured Abby just a few months earlier. One of the rattlers is actually played by the rapper Logic, and he doesn't realize Ellie is immune, so he thinks she will be scared of a clicker, but Ellie actually pushes both of them towards it, killing Logic and getting bitten herself. Now that bite is presumably extremely important. We will get back to that. But Ellie is able to get this very cool silenced automatic rifle for herself, and she's able to interrogate the other guy and get Abby's actual location at the resort. And so now she has to infiltrate basically the Rattler base through the train tracks first and eventually to the resort. And these sections are actually very hard. I know this is the last section, but there are a lot of enemies here, many of them with helmets on, and so headshots are not always effective. And this faction is brutal and cruel, and they try to keep a lot of prisoners for bad reasons, and they basically torture them relentlessly. The prisoners try to escape a lot because of how crazy they are towards them, but it doesn't often work out well for them. They also do kind of keep infected almost as pets. They chain them up and use them as defense for their base. And one thing you can do, which is pretty cool, is you can release their trapped infected, and this can cause some mayhem, which will cause a distraction and allow you to get to the next section. And this is what I do, although they only really help so much. Sometimes they actually follow you, and that can cause everyone to get alerted to you and targeting you, which sucks. And on Grounded, getting through this section is actually really hard. I do have a good number of supplies on me to help, but there are an absolute fuck ton of enemies. They will flank you, they will throw mollies at you, and eventually you're gonna have to scavenge the area if you want any hope of having to fight your way through them, because you will run out of ammo. And as I've said multiple times throughout this experience, I suck at stealth and I ultimately did have to fight them. One thing to note though is after taking enemies out very aggressively, if you do manage to run to a place and hide long enough, you typically will get that checkpoint, so your progress will save if you die. And that is nice because there are so many guys here and I was able to kind of slowly do this, whittling away at their numbers. At one point I got very low on health, so in order to progress I basically needed to be perfect. Eventually I do clear the first floor, but the second floor is really not much easier, especially because you only really have one route out and a ton of enemies still to fight, along with the fact that you don't really get a lot of supplies. Eventually though, I did find enough supplies to make a health kit to give me a little bit of extra health, but I very quickly got low on health again. A few times I just tried running for the door, but yeah, that didn't really work. So instead, I would just shoot a few of them and then retreat back to a spot where I could funnel others. And I waited for checkpoints to help give me little progress. Eventually, I thinned the herd enough that I felt that I could mostly stealth to the exit, but still not really. Regardless, I was able to sloppily sprint out to the exit. And here we are able to release a bunch of prisoners who tell us where Abby is being tortured for trying to escape. Actually, technically, these prisoners were able to free themselves because they had this magical ability that Ellie and Abby both don't have to be able to reach through and unlock a door. We are weak, but we are still out for revenge, so we go to find her. And we see her emaciated, barely looking like the Abby we remember, and clearly almost dead from torture. This contrast, I'm sure, is meant to ask the player, do you really still want to go through with this? It creates even more empathy towards Abby. And even Ellie, seeing her like this, is kind of like, okay, I'll rescue you and even let you guys get to a boat. But then at the last second, she remembers Joel and her mission, so she decides she needs to fight, despite the fact that Abby doesn't really want to. And this is a brutal and very ugly fight. Kind of makes me sick having to play it, honestly, and the game has kind of made you sick all the way through this point with the amount of violence that's in it. But to progress the story, we must continue, and eventually we do get the upper hand of Abby. Now, for an important detail, as they are fighting, Abby bites off two of Ellie's fingers, and these fingers are actually from the same exact hand that she was just bitten on from an infected. infected. So this might have some interesting impacts on the inevitable Last of Us Part 3. Will Abby turn infected, or will this somehow give her some immunity? Or is this just not the way it works? Either way, Ellie has got the upper hand and is finally able to get her revenge, but she sees another flash of Joel and this makes her stop. And she just lets Abby go and sits there sobbing as her and Lev escape. And this is another very controversial moment of the story because Ellie killed half of Seattle, all of Abby's friends. She battled through freaking rattlers. She even abandoned her one true love. And all of a sudden, she's kind of like, nah, this just would be a step too far. It's that pesky ludonarrative dissonance creeping its ugly head again. Now, I am less torn about this decision and buying it than with Joel's death because I can see some arguments for it. Like this being purely this emotional decision rather than a strictly logical one. But at the same time, that could just be another cop out. But another detail that they give us is this moment where she flashes to the past just before deciding to spare Abby. This is a moment we haven't seen yet. So maybe the answer lies in that, which we will soon find out. Ultimately, though, she lets them go, and we catch up again with Ellie sometime later, revisiting the home that her and Dina had. And very sadly, it's been abandoned by Dina, who took everything except for Ellie's stuff. Likely, Dina went back to Jackson to be with Jesse's parents, as was hinted prior. I mean, especially how can Dina raise a child and take care of a farm all by herself? It's kind of ridiculous of Ellie, actually. Like, maybe move them to Jackson first before you try to go get your revenge. But that's part of why Dina left. I mean, Ellie was more concerned with the revenge than the Last of Us, than the ones left behind. But so Ellie's stuff is still there, and she tries to play the guitar one last time, but sadly, she can't play because she's lost her fingers. One of her few connections to Joel, and she can't participate anymore because she had to go for that revenge. And now we get one last flashback. And this is truly the last conversation between Joel and Ellie. After the dance, Ellie comes to Joel. He has gotten coffee from a group that's been passing through. Perhaps this is some sort of hint that when they run into out-of-towners, those out-of-towners are generally nice, but honestly, this is not big enough clue for me to make that Joel death work. And well, it's just way too late in the story for that. But here they talk about Joel's choice. Ellie is angry at him for that and for taking her choice away. Although, to be fair, the Fireflies were also taking her choice away. But Joel says he would do the exact same thing if given a choice. Perhaps selfishly, as for himself, he would have a chance to raise a daughter. But also, Ellie has grown up into who she is today, and none of that would have ever taken place if he had let it happen. Ellie is mad, but thinks she can perhaps try to forgive him. Thinks she starts coming around and understanding at least the choice and how hard it would have been. And many of us, of course, really think that was the right choice. And this is the same choice Joel has been making from those beginning moments of the outbreak. When given the chance to save this family on the roadside that likely would have slowed them down, Joel chose to keep going and protect his tribe of loved ones. And so as she has developed some sort of understanding of Joel's actions, enough to try to forgive him, it seems that this flash that she had when she was trying to kill Abby may have also prompted her a bit to realize that she kind of understands Abby's actions enough to forgive her. Or perhaps she has been so obsessed with getting revenge that she forgot so much about why she was actually upset with Joel in the first place, and that she truly falls in the camp of feeling like he didn't make the right decision. And so somehow she feels like maybe she can understand Abby's choice. Either way, while you can interpret this to justify Ellie's decision to spare Abby, it does take quite a bit of interpretation to get there. And if this is the intent, this doesn't do enough to really connect these moments to make that clear. In fact, the constant time jumping can make it very hard to follow this all as one cohesive story, as you just keep getting taken out of one moment and mindset and into another, and it makes it very easy to forget what just happened. It's all a bit jarring, to be honest. But we soon flash back to the present, and this is where we see Ellie laying her guitar down and leaving it behind as she departs the house that she once shared with Dina. And we see the camera slowly zooming in on the guitar and focusing in a little bit on an open window. And with the moth icon prominently displayed, you see the guitar represents Joel and the moth symbol represents Ellie and their connection. But now Ellie has left Joel behind and she has moved on, and we can only hope has found some peace, at least probably for now. And so the game ends, but not without one more little wink and a nod to the player, because the start screen, which once showed the boat and the scene that just went down with Abby and Ellie, that start screen has now changed to show that same boat has now beached ashore, and it's at Catalina Island. Abby and Lev have found the fireflies, and we are left to assume that they have finally found the light. And so where does The Last of Us Part 2 ultimately land in the pantheon of video games? Was it a pure masterpiece or pure poop? Well, for me, this game definitely had moments of brilliance and moments that made me think very deeply, moments that I laughed and I cried, and the story has sat with me and continues to sit with me in ways that no other stories really do. This was an experience carefully crafted by Naughty Dog. This was the ride they wanted us to take despite our willingness to continue down this path. The gameplay was really fun, and the details, oh man, the details. Naughty Dog's attention to detail and quality and their ambitious vision can be felt around every corner. But sometimes I do feel like that attention to details has kept Naughty Dog a bit too much in the weeds and makes me think they really didn't take enough time to zoom out and make sure that the larger picture was working. They certainly dropped hints for things along the way, but not enough in my opinion for why Joel lost a step and would make that mistake of trusting those ex-Fireflies. The larger story also struggled from a pacing perspective, with those 3 beefy days from Ellie and then turning back the clock and doing the exact same thing, although this time with Abby's story, which also felt super disconnected from the main story. There was also a very long epilogue section with these mini flashbacks throughout the entire game that actually felt more important than the main core of the story. I also think that Naughty Dog took a big risk in trying to get the players to like Abby, and while that worked for some, it felt like they were putting too heavy of a hand and having us try to empathize with her. And this was just too monumental of a task to try to get us to hold this character in equal weight to the likes of Joel and Ellie. For that matter, many of the new characters that they added, they actually failed to get me to really care about, and those that I did suffered quick, uneventful deaths or were left to feel like a plot device. I do still appreciate the risks that were taken with the story though. As you can see with some of the more recent story-driven PlayStation games, that there is a bit of a fear to take those risks, which lead to blander stories. To me, The Last of Us Part 2, it's not a masterpiece, and it definitely isn't the game of a generation or better than the first game, which managed to tell a more cohesive story and leave me with this intense feeling at the end. But The Last of Us Part 2 isn't horrible either. Again, it has moments of brilliance. It has moments that have stuck with me for years, and there's so many parts about it that are still very special. This game makes you think, it challenges you as a player, and it tries to do something ambitious. To me, I feel like some small tweaks to the story and the pacing would have made this game a much better experience. All in all, with the good and the bad, I ultimately have to give this game a B on the ultimate video game tier list. Perhaps a higher B because I do feel like there really is something special here, but I have so many problems with it that it feels like giving an A would be a little bit too generous. Regardless, a B is not a bad score. It's a good score. This is a good game, and one that will sit with me for years to come. But where do you think this game lands for you? Let me know in the comments, and I want to say a special thank you to my YouTube members for joining the Bowel Movement. Consider joining the cause. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.